Hey guys! Tonight we slip into thick snowdrifts, shattered brick, and the kind of bitter cold that makes your eyelids feel like glass. The streets are scorched, every corner hides a sniper, and the air smells like burnt leather and blood. It's 1942, and you're in Stalingrad where even the rats seem afraid. This isn't your typical battlefield. This is a place where every inch of ground costs dozens of lives, where frostbite is more common than warm meals, and where you'll be lucky to survive the night without turning into a popsicle with a rifle. Oh, and spoiler alert, you probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know your location and what time it is where you're watching. I always love seeing where you're tuning in from. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You step out of a broken tenement, your boots crunching against a crust of ice layered over shattered glass and bullet casings. The river Volga lies somewhere behind you, frozen solid in patches, black in others like a sleeping beast's back. German artillery thumps in the distance, like a heartbeat that's far too loud. You duck instinctively as a shell whines overhead and bursts a block away, showering you in brick dust. You don't flinch anymore. After weeks of this, you've grown accustomed to the music of destruction. Stalingrad is not so much a city now, as it is a collection of craters loosely stitched together by the ruins of once proud buildings. You and your comrades have taken shelter in a former factory. It used to churn out tractors. Now it churns out ghosts. The Red Army clings to what remains of the city, while the Germans grind forward, house by house, sometimes floor by floor. You've heard stories one side holds the first floor, the other the third, and both lob grenades through floorboards like passing notes in a very homicidal classroom. The cold is a more consistent enemy than even the Wehrmacht. Your rifle bolt freezes shut. Your fingers feel like they belong to someone else. You share a crust of bread with a guy named Misha, who says his cousin used to live on this very street before it turned into a smoking labyrinth of wreckage. The bread has sawdust in it. You eat it anyway. Some say the Germans could have taken the city early on. Historians still argue whether Hitler's obsession with seizing Stalingrad by name alone doomed his army. He wanted a symbolic victory. What he got instead was a meat grinder that swallowed entire divisions. And here you are, part of that grinder, pushing your way through alleyways where corpses freeze into statues, and the wind carries whispers in a language you can't always understand. You enter a basement with soot-covered walls. The stairwell is gone just rebar and jagged concrete, but someone set up a makeshift stove. An old woman stirs something in a dented pot. She doesn't look up. She just mutters, "You're late." You don't know if she means dinner or death. Both are overdue. Sniper Alley, as you've come to call it, lies just 2 streets ahead. The Germans have their best sharpshooters up in gutted apartment buildings, hiding among doll heads and lace curtains. You've heard of a man named Vasily Zaitsevis. Name is whispered like a spell among the troops. They say he picks off Germans one by one, cool as ice, never misses. A Soviet folk hero in the making. One German officer reportedly called in a sniper duel to stop him. Whether that showdown really happened, no one agrees. But the legend sticks harder than the truth. You press forward with a group of ragged infantry. Your breath fogs the air like little ghosts escaping your lungs. A burst of machine gun fire erupts, and a boy he can't be more than 17 drops beside you with a thud, his mittened hand reaching for something. You kneel next to him. It's a photograph. He was trying to retrieve it from his coat. A girl with soft eyes. You leave it there. At night, you sleep under a collapsed tram car. The metal groans when the wind hits just right, like it's mourning something long gone. You share body heat with 2 others, wrapped in wool that stinks of gunpowder and boiled cabbage. Someone tells a joke about Stalin and a goat, It's not funny, but everyone laughs because laughter burns calories, and you need every spark of warmth. Food arrives in crates, dropped by brave pilots who fly low and fast over the Volga. Sometimes they miss, and the crates fall into German hands. Sometimes the crates explode mid-air, and the food rains down like cursed snowflakes. You dream of sausages and warm soup. You wake up chewing on your sleeve. The turning point begins with Operation Uranusa, name that would be funnier if it didn't involve so much dying. The Soviets flank the Germans from the north and south, snapping the pincers shut with the precision of someone who's very tired of getting shot at. You feel a strange kind of hope, a glimmer that maybe this hellhole might become survivable. But the Germans dig in too. Supplies run low. A German soldier trades his Iron Cross for a crust of black bread. You hear stories of them eating horse meat. You'd do the same. Inside the city, rats are a currency. They eat the dead. The starving eat the rats. Circle of Life, Eastern Front Edition. And then comes the surrenderer, at least the start of it. Field Marshal Paulus, the first German officer of his rank ever captured alive, is taken in by the Soviets. You hear the news from a messenger wrapped in 3 coats and carrying a chunk of potato like it's gold. Cheers erupt briefly. Then the silence returns. Even victory here feels like loss. You stumble past a fountain that once featured children dancing in bronze. Now one child is missing a head. The fountain runs red, not metaphorically, someone dumped dye into it as a joke. Or maybe it's something worse. You don't ask. Later, you find yourself warming your hands near a fire made from piano wood. Someone plays a broken chord before tossing the keys into the flames. It's the most music you've heard in months. The battle is technically over, but the cleanup will last years. Rubble stretches for miles, and beneath it all lie stories, some still breathing. Most not. You survived Stalingrad. You shouldn't have, but you did. And in the weird way soldiers do, you now miss the madness already. Like part of you was forged in this frozen scrapyard and left behind. And that's just day 1 of this journey through World War II's bloodiest battlegrounds. You might want to buckle in, maybe double up on blankets. It's going to get rough, and cold, and occasionally, very awkward. You descend a steep, rain-slick path through Italy, your boots squishing in something that might be mud or might be someone's abandoned rations. It's early 1944, and you're creeping toward a mountain that's more myth than map. Monte Cassino. A Benedictine abbey sits atop its peak like a crown carved from bone. The Germans have turned the surrounding hills into a fortress. They call it the Gustav Line. You call it a nightmare that climbs. Below, the town of Cassino smolders. Rubble litters the valley like broken chalk, each pile a former life. You're part of the Allied push-on exhausting campaign to punch a hole through this fortress and reach Rome. 4 major assaults will come and go here. You're lucky enough to be part of just one. As you trudge uphill, mortars thump in the background. The rain turns to sleet. You slip once, land face first in a shrub, and get scolded by a British soldier for making too much noise. He's covered in grime, chewing a biscuit so stale it could deflect bullets. "Try not to die loudly," he says, in the driest tone imaginable. Classic British hospitality. The monastery, once a peaceful monument to prayer and parchment, has become a symbol of the battle's moral messiness. Historians still argue whether bombing it was necessary. Some say the Germans never fortified the abbey itself, only the slopes around it. Others claim it was crawling with observers, hidden machine gun nests, and probably a few ghosts whispering tactical advice. Either way, in February, the Allies bombed it to dust. You weren't there for that exact moment, but you've seen the aftermath. Stone arches lying like fallen dominoes, frescoes scattered like puzzle pieces, saints' faces buried in ash. The destruction hurts something deep inside you, even though you're not particularly religious. Maybe it's the idea that even beauty isn't safe here. Your squad includes Americans, Indians, New Zealanders, Polson alphabet soup of accents. Everyone's tired. Everyone smells bad. A Sikh soldier named Harjeet shares a bit of tea with you brewed in a tin helmet. It's the best thing you've tasted all week. He offers you a sweet from his rations and tells you about his sister's wedding back home. You smile, though you don't understand all the words. It doesn't matter. Warmth needs no translation. Artillery rumbles, and you start crawling uphill. The terrain is treacherous steep inclines, slick rocks, tangled brush that tears at your clothes. German machine gun nests dot the high ground like hornet hives. You scramble past a shell hole and nearly fall into a ravine that wasn't there yesterday. Every time you get close to the top, a burst of fire sends you back down like a rejected climber from a cursed mountain. The monastery looms ahead, or what's left of it. You can see monks' robes flapping in the wind, still clinging to a clothesline like ghost flags. The air stinks of cordite, rain, and fear. You're not alone in this push tanks grind forward below, churning mud and metal together into a paste that sticks to everything. A Polish unit moves in beside you, eyes hollow but determined. They've got something to prove, and you feel it in the way they climb fast, focused, like each step erases an old humiliation. They've waited years for a chance like this. One of them carries a small wooden cross tied to his pack. You don't ask questions. You finally reach a makeshift trench dug into the hill. A German voice echoes above calm, commanding. You hear footsteps, then silence. A flare lights up the ruins, and shadows scatter. You hunker low. Moments pass. Then a barrage of bullets tears through the night. The man next to you, someone you only know as Frankie from Jersey, gets hit. He doesn't scream, just sort of sighs, like someone realizing the movie's over. You drag him back, whispering nonsense meant to comfort, though you both know it's too late. His hand tightens around yours before going slack. You stare at him. His helmet rolls down the hill and clinks off a stone. Days pass. Or maybe hours. Time here feels like gum stretched too thin. You fall asleep with your head against a stone that might have once been part of a baptismal font. When you wake, it's under a drizzle that feels personal. The Poles have made progress. They push through ruins and raise a flag near the monastery's highest surviving wall. It's not a grand memento parades or speeches, but it's something. A cracked victory in a battle defined by slow misery. By May, the Gustav line finally crumbles. You walk the same paths now empty of gunfire, littered with expended shells and half-buried boots. You pass the remains of an altar with a charred Bible still open. The passage is smudged, but you think you recognize the word mercy. Fitting. You don't feel any. You hear a joke from an Indian soldier, translated poorly through 3 accents, and somehow it still makes you laugh. Something about a cow, a general, and a very confused chicken. Laughter again is survival. What's left of Monte Cassino isn't much. Just a pile of rocks and memories, but the hill is yours, knower, rather, not theirs. That's how war counts victories, who's not holding the rubble anymore. You descend the slope slowly, one sore step at a time. Your joints ache. Your pack feels heavier than it did going up. At the base, a medic offers you a cigarette and a dry pair of socks. You take both. The socks feel like luxury. You sit on a rock and exhale smoke into a sky that doesn't seem to care what just happened. Later, someone tells you that Monte Cassino cost over 50,000 Allied casualties, just for one mountain, one battered monastery. The Germans lost thousands too. No one really won. Everyone just stopped bleeding long enough to move forward. You walk past a graffiti scrawl on a rock that reads, "Rome or bust." It's funny because you're busted already, inside and out. But onward you go. You're soaked to the bone before your boots even hit the sand. Salt water clings to your uniform, Your helmet weighs twice as much as it should, and every breath tastes like rust and fear. It's the 6th of June, 1944 day, and you're packed like a sardine in a Higgins boat, approaching Omaha Beach. The ramp is still up, thudding with each wave, sealing you in with the stench of diesel, vomit, and sweat. The guy next to you is whispering a prayer. The guy on the other side is just staring. Then, the ramp drops. You don't have time to admire the sunrise, which is probably lovely behind all that smoke and screaming. Bullets zip past, stitching the surf with whitecaps of death. You jump into waist-deep water, which becomes chest-deep immediately. Someone goes under. You don't see them again. You trudge forward, stumbling over metal hedgehogs and unseen corpses, your rifle above your head like it's going to help. Spoiler alert, it doesn't. German WW2s rake the beach from the bluffs. You're running sort of, because it's more like slogging through pudding. The tide pulls at you like it wants a souvenir. You face plant behind a chunk of landing craft that looks recently exploded. A medic crouches next to you, already wrapping gauze around someone's leg. "Don't stop here," he says, eyes wild. This is where they zeroed in. Your boots finally touch dry-ish sand. It's not really dry, just less wet than before. You crawl like a crab, following the others toward a shingle bank. Everything feels too loud and too slow at once. Shells burst behind you, sending sand and metal into the air. You dig in with your hands like a dog burying treasure, trying to vanish beneath the chaos. The plan was elegant. Paratroopers would drop in and secure roads inland. Bombers would soften up the defenses. The infantry would come ashore and sweep the beach clean like a broom made of rifles. But the plan didn't consider the tides, the weather, or that many of the landing craft would miss their marks. Historians still argue whether Omaha should have been canceled once things went sideways. But here you are, halfway across a killing zone named after an American state and wishing you were anywhere else. You hear someone yelling Bangalore, and seconds later, the beach shakes. Explosives clear a path through barbed wire and mines. You dash through the smoke, ducking into a crater that smells like sulfur and something worse. A sergeant points up the bluff. "That way, or we die here." Not a motivational speaker, clearly. You begin the climb. It's not graceful. You slip more than once. The grass is slick with blood and seawater. The Germans dug in up top, firing down from reinforced bunkers. Each step feels like a lottery ticket. The guy ahead of you makes it. The one behind you doesn't. You don't look back. Near the top, you find a trench abandoned in haste. A half-eaten sandwich sits on the parapet. You take a bite. It's terrible, but you finish it. It's the only warm thing you've had all day, and there's a strange comfort in chewing someone else's lunch mid-invasion. You press forward into the German defenses. Grenades first, then rifle fire. The sounds bounce strangely in your ears like your head's underwater. You peek around a corner and meet eyes with a terrified young soldier. Maybe 17. He lowers his rifle. You freeze. A fellow soldier doesn't. The boy drops. Your stomach turns, but your feet keep moving. You pass a body with a letter clutched in its hand. The ink is running. You can make out the words, "My dearest Anna." You want to believe Anna knows, that she senses the exact moment the letter stopped breathing. Further inland, tanks finally begin to arrive. One gets stuck in a shell hole, its treads spinning uselessly. The crew climbs out, waving for help. You join a group hauling logs and broken beams to create a makeshift bridge. It works, barely. The tank lurches forward and crushes an old bicycle someone once used to buy baguettes. By mid-afternoon, the beach is no longer a death trap, just a very messy parking lot for wounded men and broken dreams. You lie on a tarp next to a soldier who got hit in the shoulder. He's telling a story about fishing back home, describing the lake like it's paradise. You don't know his name, but you nod along. You picture that lake too. Anything but here. The tide recedes, revealing what the morning left behind. Helmets, rifles, torn uniforms, shoes without owners. A few shattered canteens still drip water onto the sand. You feel weirdly guilty surviving, like the beach demanded a toll and let you pass anyway. Someone nearby says this was the bloodiest of the 5 landing zones. Omaha almost broke the invasion, that if the Germans had reinforced sooner, if the bunkers held a little longer, if the bombers had hit their targets this entire day, might have ended in retreat and silence. But somehow, against all predictions, the Allies gained a foothold. Later, you explore a captured bunker. Inside is a tin gramophone and a stack of dusty records. Someone winds it up. An old French love song trickles out fragile, crackling. You sit in the doorway, staring at the beach below. The same beach you crossed in a panic now looks like an eerie postcard. The sun paints it gold. You feel like you're dreaming. You scratch your name into the concrete wall. It feels silly, but necessary. Like telling history, "Hey, I was here. I lived through this." You wonder if some future tourist will see your mark and think about who you were. Maybe they'll stand in your spot and listen for music that's no longer playing. You wake to silence, which is somehow more terrifying than the usual rumble of shelling. The windows are frosted over, but it's not from the weather. They've frozen from the inside. Your breath clouds before your face like a puff of smoke as you peel yourself from the wooden floor. A thin blanket covers you, more symbolic than useful. Welcome to Leningrad. The year is 1942, and you're in month who knows what of the siege. You stopped counting after 2 digits. The Germans surround the city in a tightening noose, and every road out is sealed except for one, the road of life, a treacherous route across the frozen Lake Ladoga. Trucks brave it at night. By morning, some of them are just dark shapes under the ice. Your stomach growls with a vengeance. You haven't had meat in weeks. Bread rations are down to 125 grams per person per day. That's a slice so thin you can see light through it, if you're lucky enough to get one. And even that's not really bread. It's flour mixed with sawdust and wallpaper paste scraped off abandoned buildings. You chew it slowly, trying to make it last longer. Doesn't help. You step outside, boots crunching on snow that's more ash than ice. Leningrad looks like it's been abandoned by the living. Statues are covered in ice like sorrowful sentries. Storefronts are boarded shut, some with slogans painted in red. "Don't light fires, enemy sees everything." You pass a frozen horse in the street. People used to walk past it solemnly. Now they walk past it with knives. You don't ask what's for dinner anymore. Historians still argue whether Stalin could have done more to evacuate civilians before the siege. Some say the Soviet command underestimated the danger. Others claim they thought the Germans wouldn't actually starve a city to death. But here you are, living in a place that feels more like a mausoleum with heating problems. You volunteer to help with firewood collection, which basically means tearing down fences and splintering park benches. Anything wooden is fair game now. Trees, floorboards, piano legs. You once saw someone eyeing a chair like it was a rotisserie chicken. No one has music anymore, just kindling. The cold bites deeper as winter tightens its grip. The temperature plunges below -30 degrees Celsius. Pipes freeze solid. Soup freezes in bowls. Even time seems frozen. You huddle with your neighbor, Nadia, whose breath smells faintly of pickled cabbage and something else, a despair maybe. She tells you stories of summers past, of the white nights when the sun barely sets and the air smells of lilacs. You try to picture that Leningrad. You fail. An orchestra gathers at the Philharmonic Hall for a performance. Not just any concert, it's Shostakovich's 7th Symphony, composed right here during the siege. Most of the musicians are either dead or on the front, so replacements are pulled from military bands and even hospital beds. You're one of the lucky few invited. The hall is unheated, and the strings keep going out of tune from the cold, but the music slices through the silence like light through stained glass. The symphony becomes a symbol of resistance, broadcast by loudspeaker and across enemy lines. They say German soldiers stopped to listen. No one knows if it's true, but you want it to be. You carry water back from the Neva River in a battered metal pail. The ice is thick enough to support tanks, but thin enough that one wrong step means vanishing without a splash. You tread carefully. A boy skates past you in silence, pulling his little sister on a sled. Neither of them smiles. It's not that kind of sled ride. Sometimes you help with the burials. The dead come in wrapped bundles, dragged through the streets on homemade sleds. Cemeteries are full. So now people just find a quiet patch of park and start digging if the ground's not too frozen. You carry a spade, more symbolic than effective. One day, you bury a girl who can't be more than 6. She still has ribbons in her hair. You dig beside a statue of Pushkin, who watches over you with an expression that might be poetry or pity. There are rumors of cannibalism. You never see it, but you hear whispers. Someone was caught trading meat that didn't smell quite right. Someone else vanished. After going to barter bread, the authorities post signs citizens, "Do not eat your children." You wish that was a joke. One day, you hear that the ice road has held. Supply trucks are coming. You gather at the edge of the lake, eyes scanning the horizon. First, you see headlights, then figures, crates, fuel, flour. The relief is overwhelming. You help unload, fingers numb but heart pounding. One box breaks open and out spills actual sugar. The grains sparkle like tiny diamonds. You pocket a handful. That night, you stir it into hot water and sip slowly, eyes closed. It tastes like a future. The Germans begin shelling again. It doesn't surprise you. You've learned the rhythm bombardment. Quiet. Starvation. Repeat. But this time, the Soviet counteroffensive is stronger. You feel it in the way people walk. Still slow, still hunched, but with a flicker of defiance. Nadia even makes a joke about the Germans being allergic to soup. Months later, Operation Iskra opens a narrow corridor. A lifeline. Supplies flow more steadily now, and while the siege isn't truly over, something in the city changes. You hear birds for the first time in ages. Someone bakes real bread. You can't believe how heavy it feels. You pass a museum preserving the siege artifacts. Inside, empty ration cards, boots made from wallpaper, a violin with one string. The exhibits feel like a dare look, what we endured. You take a moment to stare at a spoon bent from heat. Someone once ate survival from that. You wonder who they were. You wonder if they're still here. The siege finally lifts after 872 days. You don't celebrate. You just sit on a benchies, a new one, and breathe. Leningrad still bears the scars. The buildings are pocked with shrapnel, the people thinner, quieter, but they're alive, and so are you. Somehow. As you walk back home, past that same street where the horse once stood, you see a child drawing on the ice with a bit of charcoal. A sun, a flower, the word mama. You don't interrupt. You just keep walking, boots thudding softly, your breath curling in the air like music without notes. You don't hear the tanks before you feel them. The ground itself quivers beneath your knees, as though some giant has yawned awake beneath the soil. Dust hangs in the July heat, the kind that sticks to the roof of your mouth like burnt toast crumbs. You crouch in a shallow trench just outside Kursk, peeking over the lip at the horizon. Nothing but wheat and heat shimmer until a ripple of movement disturbs the golden calm. Then they come, German panthers and tigers, dark shapes bristling with armor and arrogance, roll forward in a line that stretches too far to count. You squint, trying to decide if this is bravery or madness. Soviet T-34s lie in wait, dug in like ticks beneath the fields, camouflaged with leafy branches and stubborn resolve. This isn't a skirmish, it's a symphony of engines, steel, and screaming metal. Welcome to the largest tank battle in history. The Battle of Kursk is already legendary, and you're living inside its lungs. Over 6,000 tanks, thousands of aircraft, and nearly 2 million troops converge in a region roughly the size of Connecticut. It's as if every piece of machinery on the Eastern Front decided to throw a house party in the same field, and you're stuck outside with no invitation and a Molotov cocktail. You're part of the Soviet defensive line. For weeks, engineers have dug miles of trenches, laid thousands of mines, and pre-sighted artillery at every approach. It's like someone turned the Earth into a paranoid grandparent. Everything is booby-trapped and suspicious. You string barbed wire until your hands blister. You drop logs into tank ditches that seem too shallow, then make them deeper. It's exhausting, but it might just be your salvation. When the attack begins, it's not subtle. The Germans open with an artillery barrage that shatters the stillness like glass under a hammer. You press your body against the dirt and pray your helmet works better than it looks. Explosions stitch the horizon. Your ears ring. Your molars feel loose. And then tank engines. So many that the air smells like fuel and terror. You glimpse one up close, a Panther, sleek and menacing. Its turret swivels, sniffing the wind. You lob a grenade from your foxhole, more out of instinct than courage. It bounces once, twice, and lands, somewhere. A deafening boom. The tank smokes but keeps moving. You crawl backward, heart in your throat, until another T-34 surges up beside it and rams the enemy vehicle like a steel rhino. Both tanks erupt into fire, trading their last breaths like seasoned rivals. Historians still argue whether Hitler's decision to delay the offensive Operation Citadel doomed the Germans. He waited for his shiny new tanks to arrive, but that gave the Soviets time to fortify. Some believe if the attack had come earlier, the outcome might have tilted the other way. Others insist the tide had already turned, and Kursk was just confirmation. Either way, here in the thick of it, all you know is that it's your job to survive a battlefield that seems determined to eat everyone whole. You crawl through the smoldering debris of a former tank depot, now a jungle gym of twisted steel. A charred crew hatch lies open like a yawning mouth. Inside, blackened seats and melted goggles. You avert your eyes, but the smell clings. Later, you find a German ration tin containing 2 cigarettes, a chocolate bar, and a letter in shaky cursive. You don't read German, but you recognize the shape of worry. The sky above is chaos planes, dogfight in lazy spirals, some trailing smoke, others flitting like dragonflies over the scorched earth. You hear the unmistakable scream of a dive bomber and hit the dirt just in time. The impact lifts you inches off the ground. Your ears pop. You roll over to find your pack smoking, one strap scorched clean off. The potato inside is somehow untouched. A miracle. You eat it cold, like it's cake. You stumble upon a battery of Soviet Katyusha rocket launchers, the Stalin's organs. When they fire, it sounds like the devil singing through a pipe organ made of vengeance. The Germans fear them, and for good reason. The rockets scream across the sky in colorful arcs, and entire rows of enemy armor vanish in seconds. You laugh a little, because if you don't, the sound of those rockets might drive you mad. In the small village of Prokhorovka, the battlefield becomes so dense with tanks that maneuvering feels like rush hour in a parking lot from hell. You ride atop a T-34, holding onto a handle welded for that very purpose. Below you, the turret swings lazily. Ahead, a Tiger tank looms. The gunner fires. The shells collide, metal screams, and you're thrown into the air like a puppet snipped from its strings. When you land, it's on a pile of scorched hay. You don't question the luck. You just move. That evening, you huddle in a bomb crater with 3 other soldiers. One of them insists on reciting Pushkin by moonlight. Another sharpens his knife, claiming he plans to carve his name into Berlin one day. The third just sleeps, curled up like a dog, his arm cradling a teddy bear that someone probably left behind in a hurry. You don't ask. You just sit there, watching stars blink through the smoke. By mid-July, it's clear that the German offensive has failed. You feel the change not in orders, but in the air itself. The enemy slows. They pull back, grudgingly, like someone caught bluffing. You're ordered forward no an assault, instead of a defense. You pass fields still dotted with burning tanks, many of them still smoldering from yesterday's fury. You tap one with your rifle. It clangs, hollow, dead. Someone finds a German officer's cap with a bullet hole through the front. They wear it sideways and march like Charlie Chaplin until a sergeant yells. You all laugh anyway. The absurdity helps keep the horror manageable. The final tallies of Kursk are staggering. Tens of thousands dead. More tanks destroyed in a few weeks than in some entire campaigns. But for the first time on the Eastern Front, you feel like the Soviets hold the initiative. The war hasn't ended, but the tide has shifted, and you rode the crest without drowning. You return to your trench, now quieter, and sip from a tin cup of something pretending to be tea. Your hands shake from adrenaline, or trauma, or maybe just the thought that tomorrow you'll do it all again somewhere new. You scratch a tally mark into the wood above your bunk. One more day lived. One more giant battle survived. A butterfly lands on your boot, wings bright against the soot. It stays for a moment, then flutters off toward the wreckage. You watch it go, smiling faintly. Even here, among the machines and mines and metal carnage, something soft still dares to fly. You enter the forest, and immediately, it swallows the light. The trunks close around you like silent guards, their arms tangled in barbed wire and fog. You can barely see 10 feet ahead, and everything smells like moldy leaves and scorched bark. Welcome to the Hurtgen forest where visibility is a joke, maps lie, and progress is measured in yards, not miles. You've been assigned here with a vague promise of pushing into Germany, but what you find is something worse than combat its purgatory with pine trees. The Hurtgen isn't just a forest. It's a trap disguised as scenery. Miles of dark, tangled woods cover steep hills, slick gullies, and ravines that eat entire squads whole. You push forward with boots soaked through and nerves already threadbare. Your rifle's muzzle constantly snags on branches. The mud climbs your legs like it wants to drag you under. The Germans have booby-trapped everything: trees, trails, even corpses. You step carefully, like the whole forest might explode if you breathe wrong. Your sergeant calls it the meat grinder. You call it something worse in your head, though you don't say it out loud. The sound carries here in strange way snap a twig, and it might echo like a gunshot. Or worse, it might not make any sound at all, only to be followed by incoming mortar rounds that crash through the canopy like gods throwing dinner plates. Historians still argue whether the U.S. commanders should have pushed into this forest at all. Some say it was strategically pointless, a needless detour that bled divisions dry. Others argue the goal was to keep pressure off Aachen and deny the Germans any fallback line. Either way, you're here now, and your orders are simple. Go forward. The problem is, forward doesn't seem to exist in Hurtgen. You pass the remains of a foxhole caved in by artillery. A boot sticks out. Just one. No one stops to dig. You keep walking. You've learned to step where others have stepped, like dancers in a grim ballet. Someone ahead shouts, "Tripwire," and everyone freezes. You look down. Your foot is half an inch from disaster. The wire is looped through a pine cone, designed to disappear into the clutter. You slowly step back. The guy behind you throws up. That night, you try to sleep in a hollow beneath 2 fallen logs. You curl into yourself, helmet tilted forward, hands tucked under your arms for warmth. Rain drips through the canopy, each drop like a tap on your helmet. You hear a fox howling in the distance, or maybe it's a wounded man. In this place, the difference is academic. You're awoken by artillery again. You scramble up the slope, slipping in the mud, as shells scream down like angry planets. Trees explode into splinters. One soldier, his name's Harris, from Ohio, gets impaled by a branch the size of a broomstick. It misses his heart by a hair. The medic looks stunned. "Nature's fighting back," someone mutters. There's a strange kind of humor here, bitter as black coffee. Someone starts naming the trees after generals. That tall one's Eisenhower. That crooked one, that's definitely Patton. You laugh because it's better than crying. Then someone plants a satchel charge on a German machine gun nest, and you all cheer like you just won a game of pickup baseball. You come across a German bunker dug into a hillside. It's abandoned, or at least you hope so. Inside, it smells of damp leather and fear. There's a small stove with a cold can of beans still sitting on top. You eat them, cold. They're delicious. Next to it is a tattered copy of a pulp novel, the kind with a detective on the cover and a cigarette always half lit. You flip through it by flashlight, and for a moment, you forget where you are. Progress is excruciating. You fight for one hill, only to lose it again by nightfall. The rain never stops. The fog never lifts. The Germans have the high ground, and know these woods like old friends. Their mortars are terrifyingly accurate. You start to believe they can hear your heartbeat. One afternoon, you crawl up a ravine called the Death Hollow. Why? Because it has a charming tendency to collapse under artillery, burying men in mud so thick it becomes a tomb. You make it halfway when the shelling starts again. You belly down, face full of wet leaves and earth. When it stops, the guy to your left is gone. Just gone. Swallowed. You don't cry anymore. You stopped doing that weeks ago. Your emotions have gone underground, buried beneath survival instinct and damp wool. One soldier pulls out a harmonica during a lull. He plays a sad little tune that you vaguely recognize as Danny Boy. The sound floats through the trees like a ghost, and even the squirrels seem to listen. Then he puts it away and starts reloading magazines. You find a letter in your pack that you forgot about. It's from your younger sister, written in blue ink with a little doodle of a dog in the corner. She talks about school, and how Dad fixed the fence, and how she misses your bad jokes. You read it twice. Then you tuck it into your shirt, over your heart, like armor. Later that day, you step on a mine. It clicks, but doesn't explode. You freeze, sweating bullets. A sapper gets to you an hour later, carefully dismantles the pressure trigger, and pulls you free like a surgeon. He winks. "Owes me a beer," he says. You agree. And then vow to never walk again without staring at the ground like it's suspicious. By the time your unit reaches the call trail, a narrow, muddy path, barely fit for mules, you're more ghost than soldier. The trail becomes a bottleneck. German fire rains down constantly. Your boots sink ankle deep, and you use tree roots as handholds. It's not a battle. It's a crawl through hell with extra branches. Eventually, the forest starts thinning. The sounds of war grow distant. You step into a clearing and squint at sunlight for the first time in days. Your uniform is caked in grime. Your face haggard in a way mirrors no longer help. But you're alive. You look back at the forest behind you, and it looks peaceful, beautiful, even, deceptive. A green graveyard with too many names and no headstones. You feel like you've survived something nobody else will fully understand. And maybe that's the point. The Hurtgen Forest doesn't get its own parade. It's overshadowed by bigger names. Normandy, the Bulge, Berlin. But you know the truth. The forest took more than it gave. And it keeps its secrets in the roots, whispered between trees that still lean toward each other like old soldiers trading stories. You walk away slowly, boots squelching with each step, and vow never to trust a pretty tree again. You walk through Berlin, or rather, what used to be Berlin. The city no longer resembles a capital, it's more like a smashed museum of arrogance. Entire blocks are piles of brick, twisted rebar, and scattered photographs that flutter like lost memories. Smoke rises from chimneys and craters alike. You step around a toppled lamppost, past a tram split neatly in half. This is April 1945, and the final act is unfolding in slow, brutal detail. The Soviets are here, and you're with them. Every step closer to the Reichstag feels heavier. You're not alone around you. Red Army soldiers move forward in jerks and bursts, pausing behind cars that haven't worked in months, ducking beneath balconies riddled with bullets. The Germans are defending every floor, every attic, every sewer entrance. It's like fighting a haunted house where the ghosts shoot back. You pause beside a shattered cafe. A menu board still stands outside, half-burned, listing schnitzel and coffee. A Soviet soldier beside you scoffs and mutters something about irony. He then uses the board to hammer a loose round into his rifle. Practicality wins over poetry, as usual. The streets run with water from broken mains, mixing with ash and gasoline. Your boots splash through the mire. Somewhere nearby, a piano plays one clear, ghostly note, then silence. You glance at a window, high above, see movement, and raise your rifle. Too late. The shot misses you by inches. You drop behind a fountain, shaped like a lion missing its head. The Soviet assault is relentless. Artillery pounds the city from every angle. The sky is a dull gray, bruised with smoke. German civilians scurry between buildings with white flags or trembling hands. You pass one old man painting children in chalk outside a cellar. You nod at him. He doesn't nod back. Maybe he doesn't see you. Or maybe he just doesn't care who wins anymore. The Battle of Berlin is as chaotic as it is decisive. Stalin's armies surround the city from all directions. Hitler remains holed up in his Führer bunker, giving orders few still believe in. Historians still argue whether the Soviets delayed their final push to allow the Western Allies to approach from the West, or whether Stalin just wanted Berlin all to himself. You don't care. You just want it over. You take cover behind a crumpled trolley car as machine gun fire rips across the street. Someone tosses a grenade through the window of a post office across the square. A moment later, letters and plaster rain from the sky like confetti at the world's worst parade. You crawl forward, your elbows raw, heart thudding against your ribs like a fist against a door. You reach a barricade manned by a group of Hitler Youth kids who should be in school, not firing Panzerfausts at tanks. One of them freezes when you approach, his eyes wider than his helmet. You raise your rifle, but hesitate. Another soldier doesn't. The boy drops. You hate it, but you don't stop. The street is lined with decisions like that, and you've stopped keeping count. Inside an apartment building, you step over porcelain shards and family photos. The hallway smells like mildew and fear. You breach a room and find a German officer sitting calmly on a velvet chair, revolver on the table, hands folded. He doesn't resist. You nod, and he nods back. It's all very polite. War sometimes is. You rest briefly in a kitchen where someone once baked bread. A Soviet soldier finds a half-broken teacup and pours vodka from a dented flask. You both drink in silence. Outside, another building collapses in slow, echoing agony. By the 30th of April, the fighting closes in around the Reichstag. The Germans know it's over, but they don't act like it. Snipers fire from statues. MG-42s spark from bunkers hidden in basements. You watch as tanks blast straight through walls, sending plaster mushrooms into the air. The building itself is a ruin of Soviet dreams and German denial. Your unit receives the order take, the Reichstag. The symbol matters more than the strategy now. You run through a cloud of dust and duck into the colonnade, the pillars shattered, the steps blackened by fire. Inside, the grand halls are filled with debris and echoing gunfire. You pass under murals still boasting eagles and swastikas, now peppered with bullet holes and graffiti. Someone scrawled, "Go home, Adolf," in Cyrillic on the wall. Room by room, You sweep through the darkness. Grenades go first, then men. The resistance is stiff but disorganized. One German soldier throws down his weapon and begs in broken Russian. Another opens fire from behind a tapestry. You return fire and keep moving. No time for reflection, not now. You reach the upper floors. Smoke chokes the stairwells. You cough until your ribs ache, pressing a cloth to your face. A soldier ahead waves you forward. He's found a way to the roof. You climb behind him, boots slipping on ash-stained marble, until daylight floods your vision. The roof is wind-whipped and broken. The German flag hangs in tatters, its swastika barely visible. You pull a red banner from your pack, a hammer and sickle on one side, bullet holes already fraying the edge. You and two others scale the last few meters, crawling past broken statuary and empty shell casings. Someone hands you a pole. You plant it hard, jamming it into the masonry. The flag flutters, barely at first, then fully. It catches the light just as a gust clears the smoke. The Reichstag has fallen. You say nothing. No one cheers. There's only the sound of boots scuffing concrete, of exhausted breath, and distant gunfire trailing off like a dying storm. Historians debate who really raised the flag. Was it staged for a photo? Was it genuine? The answer doesn't matter now. What matters is that you stood on Hitler's palace and gave it a new crown known, made of cloth, grit, and 1,000 unpaid debts. You descend through the Reichstag's hallways, now thick with silence. You pass a desk ornate, dust-covered. A bronze nameplate still sits on top. You run your fingers over it. You sit briefly in the chair. The irony settles like dust on your uniform. Then you stand and leave, without looking back. That night, fires flicker over the city. Berlin glows like a dying ember. You lie on the floor of an old dance hall, your pack as a pillow. Music still clings to the walls. You close your eyes and imagine the war is finally over. You almost believe it. You wake to snow, but it's not peaceful. It's the kind of snow that hides things, hides tanks, hides men, hides the sound of boots and engines. The air is too quiet for December in Belgium. The forest is still, the sky overcast, and you have this feeling in your gut like the world is holding its breath. You're in the Ardennes, part of a resting U.S. division, and nobody really expects anything today. Which is exactly the problem. It's the 16th of December, 1944. You're about to be caught in the opening blow of the Battle of the Bulge, Hitler's last-ditch gamble to break the Western Front wide open. The Germans want Antwerp. They want to split the Allies in two. They want one last win before the curtains fall. And you? You just wanted hot coffee and socks without holes. It begins just after dawn. A low rumble, far off at first, like someone dragging a piano through gravel. Then the barrage. Artillery shells erupt along the line like devilish punctuation. You dive from your tent into a trench that wasn't finished yesterday, but suddenly feels like a 5-star hotel. Trees explode overhead giant, ancient pines bursting like matchsticks. The sky rains bark, snow, and steel. Communications vanish almost instantly. Radios jam. Runners don't come back. You're cut off before you realize what's happening. The Germans are moving fast, using the weather as their ally. Fog and snow choke the air, grounding Allied aircraft and confusing artillery spotters. It's blitzkrieg with earmuffs. You scramble through the woods with a handful of others, heading toward the nearby town of Elsenborn. Or maybe it's St. Vith. You're not sure anymore. The map is smeared with mud, and your compass needle spins like it's having a nervous breakdown. A corporal from another unit stumbles past you with no helmet and blood on his hands. "They're everywhere," he says, like it's a greeting. By midday, German troops disguised as Americans are spreading chaos behind the lines. They flip signs, give wrong directions, sabotage bridges. Everyone is paranoid. You hear that a general's been detained because he couldn't answer what the capital of Illinois is. It's Springfield, by the way. You'll never forget that again. Historians still argue whether Allied command was asleep at the wheel, lulled by the idea that winter meant rest. The Ardennes was supposed to be a quiet sector, but Hitler's gamble hit like a hammer. It's the largest land battle the U.S. will fight in the war, and it begins with fog, confusion, and sheer disbelief. You're given orders to hold a crossroads with what can generously be described as a skeleton force. You dig in next to a road sign pointing nowhere useful. Snow clings to your eyelashes. You can't feel your toes. Someone tries to light a fire and gives up after 10 matches. They're coming, someone whispers. You already know. The tanks arrive. First Panthers, tigers groaning forward like beasts from a bad dream. They crest the ridge ahead, turrets scanning, barrels poised. Behind them come the infantry, cold, hungry, and terrifyingly efficient. You open fire before orders are given. The first shots crack the silence like ice splitting. You drop behind a berm as return fire rakes the position. The battle is ugly and close. You lob grenades over snowbanks. You fire until your hands cramp. You reload in a daze, fingers numb and uncooperative. When the shooting stops, you've lost count of how long it lasted. Maybe 20 minutes, maybe an hour. You've lost a friend named Donnie. You find his helmet, not him. That night, you sleep in a foxhole with 2 others, pressed close like logs in a fire. Someone hums White Christmas under their breath. It's not funny, but it's all you have. The cold is worse than pain. It's like slowly becoming a statue from the inside out. You dream of heat, of sun, of July. You wake up with frost on your lips. In Bastogne, the 101st Airborne is surrounded. You hear about it days later, from a messenger with a frost-bitten nose and a bullet hole in his coat. The Germans demand their surrender. General McAuliffe replies with one word: nuts. You love it. You chant it for hours. It becomes a battle cry, a joke, a promise. If anyone's going to break first, it won't be you. You scavenge rations from abandoned supply dumps, melt snow in your helmet for tea, and trade chocolate bars for socks. One guy swears he saw a deer, then confesses it might have been a hallucination. You all nod. The line between real and imagined gets thinner by the hour. Eventually, the weather clears. The sky turns blue for the first time in weeks. And with it comes Salvation Allied air power. Thunderbolts and Mustangs rip across the sky, bombing German supply lines, strafing convoys, lifting the fog with fire and fury. You cheer like children at a circus. You're ordered to advance again, slowly, carefully, through woods still packed with mines and snipers. Trees are shattered stumps now, the snow soaked in things best not described. You come across a German officer frozen in place, still clutching a map. His eyes stare blankly toward the horizon, as if he's still trying to win something that's already lost. The tide turns. German fuel runs dry. Their tanks stall. Infantry surrenders in droves. You move forward, passing the same villages you lost days earlier. Most of them are rubble now. You don't recognize the bakery where you once bought stale bread. It's just a crater. You finally reach Bastogne. The siege is lifted. The men there look like ghosts in paratrooper uniforms, dirty, tired, but smiling. You trade stories, cigarettes, and shoulder punches. You're part of something bigger now, something bitter and strange and unforgettable. The Battle of the Bulge will last 6 weeks and cost nearly 200,000 men on both sides. The bulge in the line eventually flattens. The road to Germany reopens. But you'll never forget how it felt to fight blind, cold, and surrounded. You carry that feeling with you, like a scar tucked under your collar. You find a postcard in the pocket of a fallen soldier, half written, never sent. It reads, "Tell Mom I'm fine. Don't worry." You fold it carefully. put it in your pack, and keep walking. Somewhere behind you, the snow begins to fall again, but this time, it feels quieter, maybe even a little peaceful. You hear the buzz of mosquitoes long before you spot the shoreline. The air in Guadalcanal feels like soup-thick, humid, and slightly hostile. You're drenched in sweat before sunrise, and your uniform clings to you like wet gauze. The jungle rustles constantly, alive with insects the size of light bulbs, and a persistent stink of rot, mildew, and gun oil. This isn't Europe. This isn't cold. This is the Pacific Theater, and it's a whole different kind of miserable. It's late 1942, and the island of Guadalcanal is the centerpiece of a campaign nobody expected to last this long. The Americans landed back in August, hoping to take a half-built Japanese airstrip and hold it. Instead, they got months of brutal fighting, ambushes in the underbrush, and nights broken by the scream of shells and the chattering cough of machine guns. And now you're here too, trudging through jungle trails with your boots squelching in mud that smells like something recently deceased. You slap at your neck again. It's not paranoia those bites swell to golf ball size if you don't stay ahead of them. Malaria pills are standard issue, but half the guys still get sick anyway. One Marine in your unit, Mitchell, keeps a bite tally scratched into the butt of his rifle. He's already at 43. You tell him that's not how immunology works. He says, "Then I better get to 100 and find out." The jungle fights differently. You don't see the enemy. You hear them rustling, coughing, sometimes whispering in Japanese close enough to make your hair stand on end. Then a burst of gunfire from the canopy sends everyone diving into vines and brush that snap like twigs. Your squad returns fire at shadows. The firefight lasts 5 minutes. When it ends, there's no one there. Just a parrot flying away, shrieking something that suspiciously sounds like, "Go, go, go." Historians still argue whether the island's strategic value was worth the cost. Henderson Field, the airstrip everyone keeps dying for eventually, becomes a pivotal Allied base. But in these early weeks, it's just dirt and ambition. The Japanese aren't giving it up without turning every palm tree into a trap. They attack at night. They scream when they charge. They appear and vanish like phantoms, and the jungle helps them every step of the way. You eat from a tin can with a spoon bent sideways. The label used to say beans, but now it might as well say hope. You'd kill for a fresh tomato. Instead, you settle for something vaguely brown and entirely salty. Dessert is a stale cookie that tastes like regret. You chase it with lukewarm water from your canteen and pray it's still iodine-free. You cross the Matanikau River, slipping across slick rocks while someone above you shouts, "Keep low," as if you needed reminding. You make it to the far side and set up near a ridge covered in fern trees. There's a smell sweet, sickly of something rotting nearby. You don't investigate. You already know what it is. The days blur into each other. Rain falls sideways, then upward, then seems to stop and start in 5-minute cycles. You keep everything in your helmet when you're not wearing itamo, socks, notes from home. It's a jungle version of a purse, and you guard it with your life. One evening, as the sun bleeds into the sea, the Japanese launch another assault. You're dug into a foxhole with 3 others. The foliage erupts in muzzle flashes. Mortars explode in trees, raining branches and shrapnel. One soldier next to you loses his hearing, another his courage. You stay because you have nowhere else to be. You fire, reload, fire again, shout something you don't remember. It feels like an eternity, and then it's quiet again. A silence so sudden, it makes your ears ring harder than the explosions. In the morning, you patrol through the jungle to assess the damage. You find discarded rifles, shredded uniforms, shattered helmets. You pass a helmet still perched on a tree stump like a warning. Inside it, a single photograph, folded. A family, smiling. You tuck it into your pack. No one needs to see that today. You learn that the Japanese call their supply line the Tokyo Express. Fast-moving destroyers sneak in by night, drop off reinforcements and supplies, and vanish by dawn. You also learn the American nickname for it is Cactus Airlines, and it's never on time. Planes stutter off Henderson Field, overloaded and groaning. Some don't come back. Those that do bring ammo, tinned meat, and once, miraculously, a crate of ice cream. It melts within minutes. Still worth it. A chaplain stops by one evening and offers a prayer, his collar stained with sweat. He has a voice like sandpaper and tells you God's got your back. You nod politely. Though in this place, it feels like even God might have gotten lost in the underbrush. One night, you're assigned to perimeter duty. You crouch near the wire, listening to the endless symphony of jungle noises. Crickets, frogs, the occasional rustle that might be wind, might be trouble. Then, movement. You raise your rifle, heart thudding. It's a boar. You exhale. Then a second later, it isn't. The alarm goes up, shots ring out, and suddenly you're back in at clay, gunpowder, shouting in 3 languages, and the metallic taste of adrenaline flooding your mouth. Later, a medic stitches your shoulder. It's not serious, just a graze. He hums while he works something upbeat and entirely inappropriate. You ask him why. He says, "Because if I stop, I'll remember where I am." Fair. You hear about a group of Japanese soldiers who tried swimming across the channel to reach their lines. The sharks got them. The next morning, the water's calm and blue. No sign of anything. The campaign drags on. You begin to recognize patterns, the way the birds go silent before an attack, the smell of gun oil in the wind, the low growl of an engine on the other side of the ridge. Your instincts sharpen. You sleep lighter. You eat faster. You start dreaming about home again, but it's distorted. Your bedroom has palm trees, your mother speaks Japanese, and your dog carries grenades. Eventually, the Japanese evacuate the island. Quietly, stealthily. You don't even know it's happening at first. One day, there's gunfire. The next, only silence. Real silence, not the loaded kind. You and your unit stand near Henderson Field, watching the sun rise for the 1000th time. The air is thick, but something is missing. The menace, maybe. The island still breathes, but softer now. Guadalcanal is secured. At least officially. The jungle doesn't really keep trophies. It just covers things over. Vines already grow over the craters. The insects return to the trees. The trail you took 2 weeks ago has vanished into green oblivion. As you pack up to leave, you look down at your boots mud-caked, split, familiar. They've been your closest companion. You pat them gently. Well done, boys. You board a landing craft that hums to life. Behind you, Guadalcanal fades into mist and jungle. Ahead lies the next island. The next fight. You close your eyes and promise to forget the taste of tinned beans. You'll fail, of course, but promises are important out here, even the ones you make to yourself. You step onto the beach and your feet sink instantly into sand that feels wrong black, volcanic, and almost hot despite the early morning. It's Iwo Jima, and you're not even off the boat before it feels cursed. The air hums with tension. There are no palm trees, no jungle, no bird calls, just ash, silence, and Mount Suribachi looming in the distance like a sleeping giant ready to roll over and crush you. It's the 19th of February, 1945, and you're part of the first wave. Your boots land in what looks like sand but clings like cement. You try to run. You barely walk. Behind you, landing craft keep unloading. Ahead, there's nothing but open terrain and the occasional explosion of soil as artillery begins its song. It turns out the Japanese let the Marines come ashore, on purpose offering no resistance at first, waiting until you were packed together like sardines before opening fire from hidden bunkers. Machine guns rip into the beachhead. You dive into a crater, the ash searing your palms as you hit the ground. Around you, men scramble, yell, vanish. The air is filled with grit, smoke, and shouted commands that barely cut through the noise. You press your face to the ground, trying to become one with it, feeling your heart thud in your ears louder than the mortars. The Japanese defenses are an underground labyrinthine island-wide fortress made of tunnels, pillboxes, and interlocked artillery nests. You can't see the enemy, only their bullets. Historians still argue whether General Kurabayashi's strategy, the deeply entrenched, no-surrender system of defense, was genius or desperation. Either way, it's working. Every step forward feels like a punishment. By noon, you've barely moved 100 yards inland. Flamethrower teams move up, hoses slung over their shoulders, spraying fire into pillboxes. The stench of burning fuel mixes with charred vegetation and something you don't want to name. A breeze picks up and carries the scent down the line. You turn your face away, eyes watering. You pass a group trying to pull a wounded man out of the kill zone. His leg is gone, and he's still cracking jokes about not needing boots anymore. He keeps shouting, "Buy me a drink first," every time someone touches him. You laugh in spite of yourself. It helps. In the way morphine helps dulls everything just enough. You reach the base of Mount Suribachi on day 2. The slopes are steep, the soil like dry cocoa powder, shifting underfoot. Each step is a struggle. You're assigned to clear a cave. You approach it slowly, rifle raised, unsure whether it's empty or worse occupied. Inside, darkness, then movement. A flash of steel. Your bayonet meets resistance. You shove, stumble, and retreat, ears ringing, heart trying to punch its way out of your chest. You make it out. Barely. Mount Suribachi is taken on the 23rd of February, 4 days after the landing. You watch as a group of Marines climbs to the summit. You can't see the fight from your position, but you feel it distant thumps, then cheers. When the flag goes up, it's small, barely visible. But it's enough. Later, a second, larger flag replaces it. The photograph of that moment will become iconic, a symbol of the whole Pacific War. You'll see it one day in a newspaper and feel a strange mix of pride and nausea. The battle, however, is far from over. The rest of the island stretches northward like a trap waiting to snap shut. You advance over ground already fought for, crawling past bunkers with sandbags still smoking. You carry more grenades than rations now. Tunnels connect everything. You never know if a bunker's been cleared or if someone's just waiting quietly for your back to turn. A Japanese soldier surrenders near your position. It's the first you've seen. He looks young, terrified, thin. He bows and offers a canteen. You take it, unsure whether it's a peace gesture or a trap. It's just water. You hand him a ration bar. He bows again, and you walk away with your head full of questions and guilt. Night is the worst. Japanese soldiers slip through the dark, launching sudden attacks from trenches you thought were empty. You sleep in fits, your rifle always within arm's reach. One night, a flare goes up. You spot 3 figures moving in the shadows. Shots are fired. Screams echo. Then silence. You clutch your helmet and pretend your hands aren't shaking. One afternoon, you're assigned to help recover the wounded. You carry stretchers through thick ash, dodging sniper fire and falling debris. One man clutches your arm the entire way, repeating a girl's name like a mantra. Another holds a bloody teddy bear. Someone must have mailed him as a joke. You don't ask. You just keep moving. Every inch of ground feels like it costs blood. Marines die by the hundreds, the thousands. You pass bulldozers clearing paths through rubble, stacking corpses as they go. A chaplain holds a service over a shallow grave, voice trembling but clear. Greater love hath no man. You mouth the words, unsure if you still believe them. You receive mail for the first time in weeks. A letter from your brother, back home in Kansas, filled with complaints about gas rationing and the cold. You laugh out loud, actually laugh, and then sit on a crate and read it 3 more times. It smells faintly of motor oil. You don't know why. It comforts you. By March, resistance begins to fade, but slowly. Too slowly. You keep advancing, bunker by bunker. One day, you help clear a cave where the defenders refuse to come out. A flamethrower solves the issue. You stand outside and hear what comes next. You try not to think about it. The official tally will say nearly 7,000 Americans killed, more than 20,000 Japanese dead. Nearly all of them fought to the last. You don't need the numbers. You saw it happen. You lived it. You buried friends in that black sand, scrawled names on crosses, left helmets to mark the spots. You'll never see another beach without remembering this one. When the battle finally ends in late March, you don't cheer. You sit on a sandbag, eating dry crackers, staring at the ocean. The sea looks calm again, as if none of this ever happened. A breeze carries the scent of salt and ash. Someone nearby lights a cigarette. You decline. You just breathe. Before you leave the island, you walk past the summit of Mount Suribachi one last time. The flag is still there, a little more tattered now, flapping in the Pacific wind. You tip your helmet without thinking, not to the flag, to the ground beneath it. You leave Iwo Jima behind, but it doesn't leave you. That sand sticks to everything. Boots, gear, soul. You carry it in the folds of your memory like grit that refuses to wash out. Years from now, someone will ask if you were there. You'll nod. But you won't say much. Not because you forgot, because you remember too well. You're standing on a beach again, but this time you don't have to storm it. No, Anzio was supposed to be easy. That's what they told you when you boarded the landing craft. Light resistance, opportunity to outflank the Germans, be home by spring. Instead, you got stuck, not charging, not retreating, just stuck. Welcome to one of the strangest stalemates of World War I eyewear. The fighting is fierce, but the waiting might be worse. It's early 1944, and you're part of Operation Shingle, the Allied amphibious landing on the Italian coast, meant to bypass the Gustav Line and force the Germans into retreat. The landing itself goes smoothly, suspiciously smoothly. You march off the boat with barely a shot fired, boots squishing through wet sand, wondering what the catch is. Spoiler, the catch is coming. You help secure the beachhead quickly. Patrols move inland, capture villages. You hole up in an abandoned villa with ornate columns and a view of the sea. Someone finds a wine cellar. Spirits are high literally. The plan was to push hard toward Rome, catch the Germans off balance, but then, nothing. The orders are to dig in and wait. That's when it all starts to unravel. The Germans counterattack with a fury no one saw coming. They flood the area with divisions, including armored units that grind forward with methodical destruction. You and your unit are suddenly surrounded, hemmed in by artillery and snipers. The villa you admired yesterday is now a smoking ruin. You spend most of your time crouched in foxholes, chewing ration crackers that taste like cardboard soaked in sadness. The rain doesn't stop. It turns the roads into rivers, the fields into soup. You wrap your feet in newspaper, change socks when you can, and still get trench foot. One guy swears by rubbing whiskey on his toes. Another just swears. You're issued rubber boots, but they fill with water faster than they drain. You start rating puddles on a scale from annoying to existential crisis. At night, the artillery starts up like a badly timed opera. Shells scream overhead, some whistling, some just appearing with a bone-rattling crack. You learn to tell by sound whether it's incoming or outgoing. You dream in bursts in minutes here, 5 there always with one boot still on. Sometimes, you wake up to find the guy next to you shaking. Sometimes, he doesn't wake up at all. One evening, you're sent out on patrol near the Mussolini Canal, a grim strip of water flanked by reeds and silence. You creep along the embankment, listening for footsteps that aren't your own. A flare goes up, white and harsh. You hit the dirt. Gunfire follows. You fire back, blindly. When it's over, you find out you were shooting at bushes. Again, historians still argue whether the Allies missed their window at Anzio. If only the landing force had pushed immediately inland, they say. If only the commanders had been bolder. Others argue that holding ground was the right call, that any further push would have ended in disaster. From where you're sitting in a shallow hole filled with cold rain, you're not impressed by either version. Supplies come in erratically. You trade socks for cigarettes, cigarettes for chocolate, chocolate for actual human kindness. You once swapped half a can of beans for a working pen and wrote a letter home. You never found out if it arrived. Maybe your sister has it. Maybe it's lining a foxhole somewhere in France. You share your shelter with a British soldier named Albie, who claims he used to be a chimney sweep. He's always humming, even when the shells fall. His favorite song is some tune about a girl from Devon. You've never heard it before. After a few days, you hum along without realizing it. You start naming the rats. They're bold and well-fed. One of them, Winston, visits nightly, sits on your pack, and waits for crumbs. You joke about training him to deliver messages. Then one day he doesn't show up. You feel oddly bereft. You make a game of counting planes. If it's Allied, you cheer. If it's German, you curse. If it's American and it accidentally bombs your sector again, you just shrug and duck. Friendly fire becomes a running gag, a bitter one. One afternoon, a Red Cross truck pulls in with mail and donuts. The driver is a woman with a no-nonsense voice and bright red lipstick. She hands you coffee so strong it could clean rust. You fall in love instantly, as do half the unit. She's gone in 10 minutes. But her presence lingers longer than most artillery. The Germans launch a major offensive in February. They push hard, hoping to crush the beachhead entirely. You dig in deeper, fight for every inch. Your foxhole becomes a second home, complete with a makeshift shelf for your photos and a crude drawing of what might be a cat or might be a horse. You fire until your barrel is hot. You reload in silence. You watch the tree line, waiting. They don't break through. Slowly, the tide turns. Reinforcements arrive. The weather starts to improve. You move forward barely at first, then with more confidence. The lines shift. The stalemate starts to crack. You enter a village that's half rubble, half ghost town. An old woman offers you bread. You thank her with canned peaches. She cries. You cry. It's weird. You walk through fields now green with spring. The sky is blue, and for a moment, it feels like you could be anywhere else. But then a sniper shot cracks, and everyone hits the dirt. It's a reminder. You're still in Anzio. The front may have moved, but the war hasn't ended. When the breakout finally comes in May, it's not dramatic. Just orders to pack up and move north. You pass through the ruins of Cisterna, a place that saw some of the worst fighting. The buildings lean like exhausted men. The walls are pocked with bullet holes. You see graffiti in English, German, Italian. One reads, "We were here. We survived." You don't feel triumphant, just relieved. You walk toward Rome, knowing this was supposed to be the shortcut. Instead, it became a long, muddy lesson in patience, pain, and the strange quiet that comes when even battle gets tired. As you march, Albie hums that song about the girl from Devon again. You join in, off-key and too loud. No one complains. It's better than artillery. You glance back one last time at the flat fields behind you, the gray line of coast barely visible. You think of Winston the rat, of the chimney sweep stories, of the girl with the lipstick and the coffee. You think of the days spent doing nothing but waiting to survive. And then you keep walking. You descend into the sewer with your back hunched low and a pistol clenched tightly in your gloved hand. The smell hits first rank, sour, damp in a way that coats your throat like mold. Water drips somewhere ahead, echoing through the tunnel like someone whispering in Morse. You've never been in a city quite like this. You're not fighting as part of a grand army here. You're part of the resistance, deep in the heart of Warsaw, and the Germans have no idea you're about to punch them in the teeth. It's the summer of 1944, and the Warsaw Uprising is burning across the city's veins. You move through tunnels because the streets above are suicidal. German tanks roll past crumbling apartment blocks, and every rooftop could hide a sniper. So you travel under their boots, the resistance's hidden veins carrying messages, weapons, and sometimes entire platoons from one shattered district to another. The walls sweat around you. Rats skitter along the edges, unbothered by the war. You've memorized the turns 3 right, 2 left, 1 ladder up to a trapdoor hidden beneath a collapsed bakery. You reach it, press your ear to the metal, then knock softly, 3 slow, 2 quick. The door creaks open, and you're yanked up into a ruined kitchen where a teenage girl, armed with a rifle twice her size, greets you with a nod. She's 17, maybe, with soot on her face and a red and white armband on her sleeve. You nod back. Words aren't necessary. The home army graduates, everywhere and nowhere. Shopkeepers by day, saboteurs by night. Your orders are simple. Hold the Wola district, disrupt German patrols, and keep the city breathing just a little longer. The Soviets are across the Vistula, close enough to see with binoculars. Everyone assumes they'll intervene. They don't. Historians still argue whether Stalin held back deliberately, letting the uprising bleed out so he could liberate a broken Warsaw instead of a free one. You have your opinion. So do the bodies piling up around you. You dash across a street littered with rubble, bullets snapping past like angry wasps. You duck behind a tram turned sideways, its windows gone, its doors twisted open like yawning jaws. Inside, a boy sings softly to himself, crouched low with a pistol in his lap. You ask what song it is. He shrugs. Used to hear it on the radio. Then he laughs, and it sounds more like a cough. The Germans respond to the uprising with ferocity. They shell neighborhoods indiscriminately. Luftwaffe bombers scream overhead, leveling entire blocks. The SS enters Wola and unleashes what you can only call murder. Civilians. Resistance. Doesn't matter. They call it pacification. You call it horror. You hear stories of field executions, buildings burned with people still inside. You believe every word. You've seen enough to know not all stories are exaggerated. One day, you help ambush a German supply convoy. It's a textbook setup Molotovs from rooftops, machine gun fire from alleys, grenades rolled under wheels. When it's over, you grab food, ammo, and bandages. A fellow fighter finds a violin in the wreckage, mostly intact. That night, you sit in a cellar lit by a single candle and listen to her play something mournful. You don't know the name. Maybe it never had one. But it makes the walls tremble more than artillery. Your base is a school that hasn't seen students in months. You sleep in what used to be the principal's office, your bed a stack of books and jackets. Chalkboards still list homework assignments. Someone's drawn a mustache on the map of Europe. You smile every time you see it. Humor survives even in rubble. You find a printing press in a basement. The Resistance still publishes newsletters. You help crank out copies with ink-stained hands, printing reports of small victories, lists of fallen comrades, and sometimes poems. One reads, We are not ashes yet. We still burn. You tape it to your coat. Water is scarce. You fill canteens from bathtubs and fountains that haven't run in days. You boil rainwater in metal pans and hope it's clean enough. Food comes in tins, if it comes at all. You chew slowly, carefully, trying to make each bite count. You once traded a cigarette for a piece of bread. Worth it. The fighting moves block by block. One day you hold a building, the next it's gone. Your squad tunnels through walls, linking basements into a honeycomb of escape routes. You learn to move like a shadow, to duck without thinking, to sleep with your boots on. You memorize the sound of incoming mortar fire. You can predict where it'll land just by how your teeth rattle. You're wounded on a Thursday. A piece of shrapnel clips your thigh during a mortar barrage. You limp through an alley into a clinic set up in an old tailor's shop. The doctor's uniform is bloodstained. His glasses are cracked. He uses whiskey for disinfectant and hums while he stitches. "You'll live," he says. That's your punishment. Time becomes strange. Days blur. Nights stretch. You lose track of the date, then the week. You measure time in gunfights, in the sound of boots over cobblestones, in the weight of your rifle. Every building you pass has a memory. That window? You shot from there. That stairwell? Your friend died on it. That bakery? You hid there for 6 hours eating stale biscuits and reading graffiti carved into the wall. Warsaw never kneels. In early September, you receive word, surrender negotiations are underway. The Germans promise protection for civilians. Few believe them. Still, there's no choice. You're out of ammo, out of food, out of options. The uprising lasted 63 days longer than anyone expected. It wasn't enough. But it wasn't nothing. You burn your last leaflet, crush your last cigarette, and walk out of the ruins with your hands up. A German officer sneers, but lets you pass. You keep your eyes forward. Behind you, Warsaw still smolders. The Soviets are still across the river, watching. You're loaded into a train car with dozens of other fighters, civilians, ghosts in borrowed clothes. Someone starts singing softly. A lullaby, maybe. You rest your head against the wall and try not to cry. You failed to save the city, but you didn't let it die quietly. Years from now, someone will ask what you did during the war. You'll think of the sewers, the cellar concerts, the printing press, the girl with soot on her face and a rifle in her hands. You'll answer quietly, "I fought for Warsaw," and in your mind, it still lives. You leap off the ramp and immediately regret every decision that brought you here. The water's too shallow. The reef stops you cold. And the bullets, well, they don't care about tide charts or coral formations. You're stuck, chest deep in the Pacific, 50 yards from shore, and Tarawa is already a disaster. It's November 1943, and the U.S. Marines are storming Betio Island in the Tarawa Atoll, part of the Gilbert Islands. It's tiny, barely a square mile of sun-bleached sand and bristling bunkers, but it's fortified like a bad dream. The Japanese have dug in with bunkers, pillboxes, and connected trenches that turn the island into a concrete anthill. You've heard that one Japanese admiral boasted it would take 1,000,000 men 100 years to take it. You've got fewer than 20,000 Marines, and about 76 hours to get it done. Your Higgins boat hit the reef too early, the tide refused to rise, and now you're stuck wading across open water, under fire. It feels like slow-motion suicide. Around you, bodies bob in the surf. Some scream, some don't. Your rifle's above your head, but the bullets are everywhere. You keep moving because there's nothing else to do. Finally, you crawl onto the sand. It's not much better. The beach is a killing field, no cover, just dead coral, broken crates, and the faint hope that maybe if you lie still enough, you'll become invisible. You drag yourself behind a Japanese tank turret sticking out of the sand like some abandoned dinosaur fossil. A shell whistles past and explodes 20 feet away, showering you in sand and pieces of something you try not to identify. Historians still argue whether the landing should have been postponed until the tide rose. Some say intelligence underestimated the coral reef and the strength of the defenses. Others argue that the sacrifice at Tarawa was necessary to learn hard lessons for the island-hopping campaign ahead. Either way, you're part of that lesson now scribbled in blood, sweat, and salt water. You regroup with a few others behind a seawall, breathing heavily, hearts pounding so loud it drowns out the gunfire. A corporal named Jensen laughs manically, wiping blood off his helmet. "Well, that was awful," he says. You all nod, not really sure what else to say. You move forward in short bursts. 10 feet. Pause. 10 more. You lob grenades into sandbag nests, duck under return fire, and crawl through shell craters that steam from earlier blasts. You find a fallen Marine, half buried in sand. His dog tags are still visible. You pocket them gently. It's the only dignity he'll get. By afternoon, you've reached the edge of the airstrip, a stretch of flattened coral that offers no cover and plenty of reasons to stay low. You wait for smoke cover, then sprint across, legs pumping like they belong to someone else. Machine guns chatter from the other side. You fall once, get up, keep running. You reach the far side and dive into a trench that wasn't there 5 minutes ago. The Japanese defenders are relentless. They don't retreat. They don't surrender. They don't stop firing, even when it's clear their position is doomed. You start using flamethrowers and satchel charges. The sound of a bunker catching fire is like the earth exhaling. You don't want to hear it again. You will anyway. At night, you dig in among broken trees and shattered bunkers. You rest with your back against a rusted fuel drum. The stars above are crisp and cruel, like diamonds spilled on obsidian. You share a cigarette with a private from Nebraska. He tells you his girl back home has a nose like Betty Grable and a laugh like spring rain. You say nothing, but you picture her anyway, just to remember what normal feels like. Sleep is interrupted by a banzai-charged dozens of Japanese soldiers screaming, charging with bayonets. You fire until your clip runs dry, then reload and do it again. When it's over, the silence feels wrong, like the world stopped breathing. The third day comes, and with it, the final push. You advance block by block, bunker by bunker. You find a group of Japanese officers who've taken shelter in a last stand compound. One offers resistance. Another takes his own life before you reach him. You don't judge. You just press on. You finally reach the far side of the island. It's quiet now. The sun rises slowly over an ocean that looks too calm to have witnessed this much death. The Marines begin clearing the last pockets of resistance. A handful of prisoners are taken barely. Most fight to the end. The final toll. Over 1,000 Americans dead, more than 2,000 wounded. Of the roughly 4,500 Japanese defenders, only 17 surrender. 17. The rest are buried where they fell, or in mass graves marked by crude wooden crosses. You help build one, hammering a board into the sand with hands still shaking. You write your name on the inside of your helmet with charcoal, just in case. A chaplain leads a brief service for the fallen. You stand in a row of silent men, boots pressed into sand soaked in more than seawater. The chaplain's voice wavers, but never breaks. He speaks of duty, sacrifice, and the promise that these men won't be forgotten. You're not so sure. You already forget where you landed. The whole beach blends together now. Someone finds a cracked photo album in a wrecked command post. Inside, pictures of Japanese soldiers laughing, cooking, even playing baseball. You stare at one man holding a kitten. You blink, and the image haunts you. You leave the album behind. Before leaving Tarawa, you help gather the fallen. Some are buried at sea, bodies wrapped in canvas, slipped over the side with a prayer and a splash. Others are laid to rest on the island, markers lined up in crooked rows. You don't remember all their names, but you remember their faces. That's enough. As your ship pulls away from the shore, you look back at the beach-black sand, broken trees, rusting wreckage, a landscape carved by fury. It looks quiet now, almost peaceful. You know better. Tarawa was supposed to be simple. It wasn't. It became a warning, a reminder that even tiny islands can demand enormous prices. You paid yours, and you survived. You don't know what comes next, just that you'll probably be back in another landing craft, on another reef, wading into another hell. And you'll do it anyway. You duck under an archway as the sirens start, their rising wail sending shivers down your spine, even though you've heard them so many times you've nearly stopped reacting. Nearly. You grab your gas mask just in case, even though no one expects gas this late in the war. It's February 1945, and you're in Dresden. And tonight, the sky is going to fall. The city has been called the Florence on the Elbe, a place of domes and bridges and Baroque beauty. But tonight, it's just a target. A big one. You've been working with the local civil defense, helping civilians find shelter, handing out rations, and watching as families try to maintain some shred of normalcy in a place where normal disappeared several winters ago. The first bombers arrive just past 10 p.m. They glide in over the hills from the west, engines buzzing low, too many to count. British Lancasters, hundreds of them. You hear the drone long before you see the flashes. Then come the flares bright white phosphorus streamers called Christmas trees by the crews drop to illuminate the targets. The glow is almost beautiful, until it becomes terrifying. The bombs fall in waves. High explosives first, breaking roofs, shattering windows, opening wounds in the city's skin. Then come the incendiaries. You feel the heat before you see the fire sand, angry orange pulse that begins to devour the rooftops in clumps, then leaps from block to block like it's alive. You're huddled in a cellar beneath a church, pressed between a crying child and a man gripping a crucifix like it's steering the building. Historians still argue whether Dresden was a necessary military target. Some point to the railway lines, the arms factories, the German troops passing through. Others argue it was cultural revenge, a show of force, a warning to the East. What you know is that above your head, history is burning in real time. The firestorm begins around midnight. You crawl outside after the first wave, thinking it might be over. That's when the second wave arrives. The air changes. It becomes hot, dry, almost heavy. A strange wind kicks up not from the sky, but from the ground. Superheated air rises, drawing in cooler air at hurricane speeds. You see a sheet of flame slide across rooftops like spilled gasoline. A man walking beside you is pulled forward by the wind. He falls and doesn't get up. You run it toward safety, but toward a group of civilians trying to evacuate a children's hospital. The nurses are frantic. You help carry stretchers. One child clutches a rag doll with half its face burned away. She doesn't cry. She just stares at the smoke curling around the doorframe. In the old market square, the cobblestones glow red. Not figuratively, literally. The heat is so intense it's melting glass, igniting oxygen. Buildings collapse inward, like exhausted lungs. You help a woman out of the rubble. Her face is cut, her blouse torn, but she smiles at you with the calm of someone who has seen too much. "Dank," she says, and then limps off without waiting for an answer. You lose count of how many hours you spend pulling people from shelters that are either caved in or cooking from the inside. One man, a baker, offers you a crust of bread from his satchel, almost instinctively. You take it, then share it with someone who's missing a shoe and half a coat. No one says much. The silence between the bombs is sacred. The smell is unforgettable. Burning wood, of course, but also rubber, plastic, metal, fabric, and things better left unnamed. You try breathing through a scarf, but it's no use. Your throat burns. Your eyes sting. You feel the ash coating your skin like fine powder. By dawn, the worst of it is over, but the city still burns. You walk through the Altstadt and can't recognize it. The Zwinger Palace is a skeleton. The Frauenkirche has lost its dome. Statues lie face down in the rubble, arms broken, wings shattered. A violin lies on the street, strings burned away, still glistening with dew or something more tragic. You find a fire brigade still working. They spray water on embers that flare up again and again, like angry memories refusing to die. You join them, passing buckets, your arms aching with every lift. It's useless mostly, but you keep going because it's all you can do. Later, in the crypt, beneath a university chapel, survivors gather. You sit on the stone floor, passing a tin mug of water. No one asks where anyone else came from. No one needs to. You're all from Dresden now. From this moment, from this fire, news spreads that over 1,000 bombers dropped nearly 4,000 tons of explosives in 2 nights. Entire neighborhoods vanished. Tens of thousands killed. Some vaporized, some suffocated in shelters where oxygen turned against them. The numbers don't make sense to you. What makes sense is the shoe you found in the square, perfectly intact, with no foot inside. Someone plays music again on a harmonica this time. The tune is soft and clumsy, but it echoes off the stone like a lullaby. A few people hum along. You lie back, eyes closed, and drift halfway toward sleep before the coughing fits return. The dust has settled in your lungs like it plans to stay a while. The next day, you help dig graves. Some are shared, most are shallow. You mark the crosses with chalk. Names are few. Unknown woman. Child. Elderly man. Blue coat. You stop trying to remember them all. You just keep digging. You receive orders to move out the following week. Your unit is needed elsewhere. You pack what little gear you still have: some gauze, a half-empty canteen, the harmonica if the kid doesn't want it anymore. He gives it to you with a nod. You tuck it into your bag. As your truck pulls away, you glance back at the skyline. There isn't one. Just smoke, spires half standing, and the faint sound of hammering as someone, somewhere, tries to rebuild something. It seems too soon. It's never soon enough. You'll carry Dresden with you, not because of what was destroyed, but because of what survived. A violin, a rag doll, a song in the dark. You saw the city fall, but you also saw people get back up, and maybe that's the real story. Not the flames, but the hands still reaching through them. You march under a sun so bright it feels like it's trying to kill you personally. The road stretches ahead in a blur of heat and dust, and your mouth feels like it's been stuffed with wool. Welcome to the Baton Death March. You haven't slept properly in days. You're down to your last canteen of water, and your feet don't even talk about your feet. They're blistered, raw, and feel like someone swapped them for hot stones. And yet, you walk. It's April 1942, and Bataan has fallen. After months of brutal fighting against the Japanese invasion of the Philippines, the U.S. and Filipino forces on the peninsula have finally surrendered. You're among the tens of thousands now being relocated, a polite euphemism for what quickly becomes a nightmare. The march begins near Mariveles and will end, eventually, in San Fernando. But no one tells you how far that really is. You'll figure it out one agonizing step at a time. The road is lined with tropical trees and the occasional corpse. You try not to look at them, but some are impossible to miss: men who simply collapsed and were shot where they lay. Others were bayoneted, their helmets still sitting politely beside them like loyal pets. The Japanese guards bark orders and swing rifle butts without warning. You learn quickly: don't talk, don't stop, don't draw attention. You glance over at a Filipino soldier walking beside you. He's bleeding from a gash across his cheek, but he keeps pace, jaw set like he's chewing glass. You ask his name. He says, "Santiago." That's all. You nod. That's enough. Your canteen runs dry within the first day. When you spot a water buffalo wallow by the road, it looks like heaven. Several men dash toward it, hoping for a sip, maybe just to dip their shirts. A Japanese guard opens fire. 2 fall. You look away. Thirst will have to wait. Historians still argue whether the brutality of the march was due to poor planning, lack of supplies, or deliberate cruelty. Some say the Japanese troops, unfamiliar with handling large numbers of prisoners, simply panicked. Others point to clear patterns of abuse. You stop caring about the debate around hour 6 when the blisters on your heel burst and soak your socks. At night, there's no rest. You sleep by the side of the road, if at all, surrounded by the moans of the wounded and the buzz of insects drawn to the sweat and blood. One man in your group slips away into the jungle. You don't know if he escaped or was caught. You hope he made it. You tell yourself he did, even when you see his boots on the road the next morning, empty and still warm. Food is sporadic. You're handed a ball of rice the size of a golf ball and a pinch of salt. You eat it slowly, savoring every grain. Someone finds a mango in the brush and shares it. You swear it's the best thing you've ever tasted, even though it's half rotten. Your teeth ache from it, but you smile anyway. Santiago stumbles around midday. He hits the dirt hard. A guard walks over, rifle raised. You freeze, but instead of striking him, the guard nudges him with his foot. Santiago doesn't move. The guard walks away. You and another prisoner drag him back to his feet. He doesn't say thank you. He doesn't need to. You pass by an abandoned car. Its tires flat. Its windshield spiderwebbed with cracks. Someone wrote, "Help us," in the dust on the hood. You add a line beneath it. "Still here." No one laughs, but a few lips twitch. The sun never lets up. You start seeing things shimmering pools that vanish when you blink, palm trees doing the jitterbug. At one point, you're sure you hear jazz music. It's not real, but it helps. You hum along anyway. You reach a checkpoint and see piles of discarded gear helmets, canteens, rifles. The guards force you to strip down to your undershirt. Some prisoners are barefoot now, their soles cracked and bleeding. One man wraps rags around his feet like makeshift sandals. Another just walks on, leaving bloody footprints behind him like breadcrumbs for death. The jungle looms nearby, green and indifferent. You think about running. You think about disappearing into it. But you stay, because you know if you stop, you won't get up again. At a rest stop near a village, a group of local Filipinos sneaks food and water to the prisoners. A woman hands you a banana and smiles. You whisper a thank you. A guard sees her and raises his rifle. The crowd scatters. You don't see her again. But you eat the banana. Slowly. Gratefully. On the 5th day, maybe the 6th, you've lost track. Rain finally falls. It comes suddenly, pounding the road like applause. You tip your face up and let it wash over you, mouth open, arms wide. Everyone does. The guards don't stop you. Maybe they understand this part. Maybe they're human too. Eventually, you reach San Fernando. You're herded into a rail yard, packed into boxcars so tightly you can't sit, can barely breathe. The heat inside becomes suffocating. Some men faint. Others die where they stand. You try not to fall asleep, afraid you won't wake up. When the doors open again, it's night, and the smell inside the car nearly knocks you over. You're marched again to Camp O'Donnell, where the real suffering continues: disease, starvation, and abuse that makes the march seem like a cruel warm-up. But that's another chapter. For now, you lie in the dirt outside the gate, finally allowed to collapse. Your entire body aches. Your mind feels distant, like it stayed back on the road somewhere. You survived the march. Thousands didn't. You don't feel proud. You just feel quiet. Later, you carve Santiago's name into the wooden frame of your bunk. He didn't make it. He collapsed an hour before the camp. You tried to carry him. The guard didn't let you. You sit with your back to the wall and stare at nothing. Your feet are wrapped in cloth, your stomach empty, but you're alive. That's the first miracle. The second is the tiny green shoot poking through the mud near your boot. You stare at it for a long time. Maybe something still grows here. You squint through a swirling cloud of sand as the wind smacks your face like a fist wrapped in parchment. Everything tastes like dust-your canteen water, your breath, even your thoughts. The Sahara stretches endlessly around you, a blur of gold and beige, rippling like an ocean you can drown in without ever sinking. This is El Alamein, Egypt, and you've landed smack in the middle of a tank ballet where every move ends in fire. It's October 1942, and you're part of the 8th Armeeth Desert Rats, preparing for a massive Allied offensive to push back Rommel's Afrika Korps. The first battle of El Alamein earlier that summer had stalled the Axis advance, but this second one, is meant to break them. The Germans have dug in, using mines, artillery, and a lot of misplaced confidence. You're here to prove them wrong, one sand-choked trench at a time. The night before the battle, the desert is almost beautiful. Cool. Quiet. Stars above you so clear they feel fake. You and your mates sit in a shallow foxhole, sharing dry rations and worse jokes. A corporal from Yorkshire tries to boil tea over a sputtering flame. It tastes like oil. You drink it anyway. Someone plays a harmonica. Someone else adds a few lines of poetry. It's oddly peaceful for a place about to explode. The offensive begins just after 9:40 p.m. on the 23rd of October. A barrage of artillery fire kicks off Operation Lightfoot. Over 1,000 guns erupt in unison, lighting up the horizon like an angry sunrise. The roar is constant deafening. You press your helmet down tight and mutter something that might be a prayer, or just your own name, over and over. Your boots crunch across the desert floor as you move forward in a line, careful, deliberate, trying to follow the paths cleared through the minefields. They're everywhere. The Devil's Gardens, they call them. Tripwires, anti-tank mines, booby, traps buried like evil Easter eggs. Engineers crawl ahead with bayonets, probing gently. One wrong step, and the desert makes its opinion clear. You pass the remains of earlier fighting burned-out tanks, shattered trucks, skeletons of vehicles baked under the Egyptian sun. One has the words, "For Clara," painted on the side in faded white letters. You wonder who Clara was, and if she'll ever know. Rommel isn't present at the battle's starths on medical leave in Germany, but his absence doesn't make things easy. The Germans and Italians have built a brutal defense in depth. Anti-tank ditches, overlapping fields of fire, concrete bunkers disguised as dunes. Progress is painfully slow. Each inch is fought for with blood and smoke. You climb into a crater that wasn't there yesterday. It smells of cordite and singed canvas. From here, you watch as a Matilda tank rumbles past, followed by a swarm of infantry. The tank hits a mine and erupts. You duck. Sand rains down like gritty confetti. When you lift your head again, the tank is gone. Just a column of smoke where Clara's cousin might have been. In the heat of battle, you lose all sense of direction. The wind shifts constantly, blowing smoke and sand in equal measure. You wipe your goggles for the 100th time and wonder if the enemy even knows you're coming. Then the tracers light up, red and green streaks painting the air. You hit the deck, your cheek pressed into the warm ground, and return fire into shadows. Historians still debate whether Montgomery's plan was too cautious, too methodical. Some say his emphasis on preparation saved lives. Others believe a faster strike would have broken the Axis more decisively. What you know is that no plan feels cautious when you're running through machine gun fire with half a map and a full bladder. On the third night, the tempo changes. You push deeper into enemy lines. The Italians start surrendering in clumps, exhausted, starved, some waving handkerchiefs or just walking forward with empty hands. You search them, offer water, move on. One of them smiles at you and says something in Italian that sounds like, "No more war." You smile back and nod. You get it. You eat in 5-minute bites, hardtack and jerky chewed while crouched behind rocks. The sand gets into everything: your boots, your rifle, your fillings. You wake one morning with grit in your ears. You try to clear it and cut your thumb on your own helmet rim. The desert is not your friend. It's a third enemy, impartial and thorough. Your battalion comes under fire from an anti-tank gun buried deep behind the front. You flank it with 2 others, crawling through scrub and praying the operator's eyes are tired. When you reach it, the gunner is asleep or dead. You can't tell. You don't ask. You plant the charge, dive back, and the explosion kicks dust into the air like a curtain dropping on a play. You write in a journal when you can, pages smeared with sweat and sand. You write letters you'll never send. You start one with, "Dear Mum, I'm fine," and stop halfway through. You just stare at the page for 20 minutes, then fold it carefully and tuck it away. Finally, after days of grinding, the Axis line breaks. Rommel returns just in time to order a retreat. You're too tired to cheer. You just keep walking forward, one aching foot after another, past twisted metal and tire tracks leading west. You pick up a German bayonet and slide it into your belt, not as a trophy, just something to remember the moment by. Montgomery declares victory. Churchill calls it the end of the beginning. You just want water that doesn't taste like heat. You find a canvas bucket near a field hospital and drink 3 times. It's warm, but it's clean. You nearly cry. You spend the night in a captured Italian position. There's a makeshift chapel made from crates and camouflage netting. Someone's drawn a crude angel on the wall, wings spread wide, holding a cup of coffee. You stare at it, then lie down with your back to the wall and your eyes on the stars. The battle is over. El Alamein is behind you. The desert will keep its secrets buried deep in dunes and bones, but you'll carry it with you, in every grain of sand you find in your boots weeks from now, and in the silence that lingers long after the artillery fades. You round the corner of a cracked stone wall, the air thick with the smell of plaster, smoke, and something metallic that sticks to your teeth when you breathe too deeply. Ahead lies what's left of Manila. Once a jewel of the Pacific, the pearl of the Orient, it now looks like someone tried to fold the entire city into itself and set the remains on fire. Buildings lean like drunks in an earthquake. Trees are blackened skeletons. And somewhere among the craters and cathedrals, you keep stepping over proof that war in a city never leaves quietly. It's February 1945, and you've just entered one of the most brutal urban battles of the war. Manila is supposed to be liberated. That's what the headlines will say. But what you see on the ground isn't liberation. It's carnage wrapped in crumbling marble. You're part of the U.S. 1st Cavalry Division, pushing block by block, building by building, to drive the Japanese out of a city they've decided not to surrender. The Japanese troops here aren't just soldiers. Many are naval personnel and fanatical holdouts under Admiral Iwabuchi, who's defying orders to retreat. They've turned government buildings, mansions, even churches into fortresses. And you're moving forward through city streets where every window might hold a rifle, every basement might hide a trap, and every child might be watching from behind rubble with eyes older than yours. The civilians haven't fled. They can't. They're trapped here, just like you, dodging artillery, hiding in closets, trying to stay beneath the notice of soldiers who now view them as liabilities at best, threats at worst. You pass an alley where a woman cradles her son beneath a canopy of electrical wire. She doesn't look up. She just rocks him back and forth, like time hasn't moved since the first explosion. Historians still argue whether the destruction of Manila was avoidable. MacArthur had promised to spare the city, to restore it without ruin. But once the Japanese dug in and turned every district into a last stand, sparing anything became impossible. The result was one of the most horrific urban battles of the 20th century, a conflict that swallowed heritage, lives, and buildings without mercy. You enter Intramuros, the old walled city, and immediately understand why this place mattered. Ornate cathedrals now lie in ruin, their towers half gone, their altars shattered. You pass the ruins of the Santo Domingo Church, where the carved saints look down from their perches with cracked expressions, as if pleading for it all to stop. The fighting here is so close you can hear enemy soldiers breathing before you see them. Your squad takes shelter in the burned-out shell of the city hall. You sleep in an office where the calendar still reads January. A gold-framed portrait of a man in a suit hangs sideways, one corner dark with soot. In the drawer, someone finds a tin of pineapple candy. You each get one. It's the sweetest thing you've had in weeks. You suck on yours like it's a secret. You fight room to room, floor to floor. Sometimes you're the attacker, sometimes the ambusher. You learn to move low and quiet, to toss grenades through doorways before stepping inside. You see men cut down in stairwells, on balconies, in courtyards. A sniper in the shell of a library takes out 3 men before someone flushes him with fire and a few well-placed rounds. His body topples from a second-story window and lands next to a burned set of encyclopedias. You pass a school converted into a command post. Inside, chalk still marks the blackboard, conjugations in Tagalog and English. Beneath it, bullet holes pock the walls. A child's drawing hangs lopsided from a nail-stick figures holding hands under a yellow sun. You reach up, straighten it, then move on. One day, you're assigned to clear a mansion near the Bayview area. The front gates are twisted metal. The courtyard is filled with statues, many of them headless now. Inside, the floors are polished marble, slick with water and something darker. You advance carefully, room by room. One holds a piano missing half its keys. Another holds a bathtub that someone died in. The silence makes your skin crawl. At one point, you find yourself crouched in a church pew, exchanging fire with a machine gunner holed up in the choir loft. A mortar shell hits the side wall, sending stained glass flying like shrapnel. A piece slices your arm. You wrap it with gauze and keep going. Later, you find a shard of blue glass in your sleeve. You keep it. You're issued a flamethrower unit one afternoon. It's heavy, awkward, terrifying. You practice once, then use it twice in real combat. Afterward, you don't speak for an hour. You just sit against a wall, wiping your hands even though they're clean. By mid-February, you start to see signs the Japanese are losing ground. Their resistance gets more frantic, more erratic, but also more cruel. You find entire buildings filled with civilians, executed without reason, mothers clutching children, whole families beneath blankets. You walk through these scenes silently, your jaw clenched so tight it hurts. You stop wondering what kind of men would do this. You know, one day, in a basement, you find a boy barely 6 hiding under a crate. He doesn't speak. He just stares. You offer him a cracker from your pack. He takes it, eats it in slow bites, never breaking eye contact. When you lift him into your arms, he wraps around you like he's made of vines. You carry him to safety. He never says a word. The battle drags on into March. The last holdouts fire from buildings that no longer have roofs. You return fire without ceremony. No orders needed. The city itself is your guide now. You go where the smoke is thickest, where the resistance is loudest. When the shooting finally stops, you walk the length of the bay and see the city as it now stands flattened, burnt, hollow. Over 100,000 civilians dead. More than 80% of the city destroyed. Intramuros reduced to rubble. The memory of old Manila crushed beneath boots and artillery. Historians will write about the liberation, the strategy, the costs. You'll remember the child in the basement, the piano in the mansion, the candy tin in the city hall drawer. These are the moments that stick. Not the orders, not the maps. Before you leave, you return to a rooftop overlooking the bay. You watch the sun set across the water. It's still beautiful, unchanged, unbothered. You sit there until dark, then descend back into what's left of the city, boots scuffing stone, hands in your pockets, thinking of the silence that follows a city's scream. You arrive in the dark, your boots clanking on the deck of a Navy transport, while the wind snatches every word from your mouth and hurls it into the crashing surf. The sea is angry tonight, and so is everyone else. The ship rocks. The air stinks of oil and fear, and the sky above is grayer than your mood. You're staring at the southern tip of Okinawa, and you already know this isn't going to be easy. You can feel it in your bone sand, in the way the officers keep avoiding eye contact. It's April 1945. The largest amphibious assault of the Pacific War is underway. Okinawa is the last major stepping stone to the Japanese mainland, and the island will be taken no matter the cost. The code name is Operation Iceberg. You can't help but think that's a cruel joke, because there's nothing cold about this fight. It's going to be long, wet, muddy, and hot, and deadly. Very, very deadly. You land under gray skies and unexpected silence. No hail of bullets, no shrieking mortars. It's eerily quiet, almost like a setup. You and your unit move inland cautiously, pushing past empty fields, abandoned villages, and wide, green hills that feel too peaceful for what's supposed to be hell. For a moment, you start to wonder if maybe, just maybe, the Japanese pulled back or surrendered. They didn't. They're waiting for you at the southern end of the island, dug in like ticks inside the ridges and caves of Shuri Line, a natural fortress that will soon become your personal nightmare. In the meantime, kamikazes rain from the sky like curses hurled by angry gods. You watch from the cliffs as waves of them scream toward the U.S. fleet offshore. One by one, they crash into destroyers, transports, carriers. You see a ship explode in 3 pieces. You see sailors leap into the sea, flames licking their heels. It doesn't look real, but it is. Historians still argue whether the Japanese High Command saw kamikaze attacks as desperation or divine strategy. Some say it was a cultural death spiral. Others call it pragmatism with a fanatical paint job. All you know is that when those planes dive, they don't flinch, and neither do the men on deck, gunning them down with faces that haven't slept in days. You push south toward Naha and Shuri, the rain soaking your gear, turning every trench into a swamp. The mud clings to your boots like guilt. Shell craters become quicksand. The monsoon hits hard. Everything is wet. Your rifle, your socks, even your thoughts. You pass through villages that are nothing but ruins now. Charred wooden beams, scorched altars, stone gardens, half buried under rubble and shrapnel. A rusted bicycle lies beside a temple gate. You step over it and move on. The fighting turns brutal. Caves dot the hills like open mouths, and everyone could hide an ambush. The Japanese defenders use tunnels that let them vanish after an attack, only to reappear in places you thought were clear. You call them ghost soldiers. You clear one hill, and it's retaken the next morning. You retake it. Repeat. You lob grenades into crevices. Use flamethrowers on cave mouths. You hate it. You do it anyway. You dream of fire, and the sound of screaming that doesn't always come from your side. One night, a group of Japanese soldiers slips through the lines and attacks your outpost. It's chaos gunfire, shouting, bayonets in the dark. You fight hand to hand. You lose a man named Donnelly, who always joked about opening a bar in Chicago after the war. You find his notebook in the mud, pages smeared, but still legible. You keep it. the civilians on Okinawa suffer even more than the soldiers. They hide in caves, dig holes in fields, try to disappear. Propaganda told them horror stories about torture and slaughter at American hands. Some believe it, some don't. You pass a cliff where several jump to their deaths rather than be captured. You don't look down. You can't. A woman walks into your camp one afternoon, barefoot, holding a white cloth above her head. She's carrying a baby barely alive. No words, just eyes like polished stones. The medic takes them. You never see her again. You reach Shuri Castle, what used to be a castle. The Japanese turned it into a fortress. Artillery shells rained down on it for days. When you finally enter, it's a charred ruin. The stone walls are blackened. The inner chambers are filled with the dead. Some Japanese soldiers have taken their own lives. Others were caught mid-prayer. The silence is unnerving. You move forward again, inch by inch, ridge by ridge. Sugarloaf Hill, Half Moon, Kakuzu Ridge. Each name becomes a memory you don't want. You start to recognize the sound of different shells mortar, 75 millimeters, grenade blast. You duck without thinking. You sleep sitting up. You forget what silence used to sound like. One morning, a kamikaze crashes into an ammo ship offshore. The explosion is so huge it lights up the sky like dawn. Debris rains for miles. One piece of metal plate the size of a mailbox lands a few yards away, steaming. You touch it, it burns you. You laugh anyway. You find a moment of peace near a river. You take off your boots, dip your feet in, and close your eyes. A dragonfly lands on your knee. You don't move. The world is quiet for exactly 8 seconds. Then, someone yells, and the war resumes. The Japanese finally start to break by late June. Their lines collapse, slowly, like a dying breath. General Ushijima, the Japanese commander, takes his own life in a cave with full ceremonial rites. You hear about it over a crackling radio. You nod, like that makes sense somehow. Okinawa is declared secured on the 22nd of June. The fighting lasted nearly 3 months, almost 50,000 Allied casualties, more than 100,000 Japanese soldiers killed, tens of thousands of civilians. The island looks like it was gnawed on by gods and spit back out. You walk through the remains of a village near the southern cliffs. Children peek from behind stone walls. You wave. One of them waves back. You hand out candy from your rations. They smile. It feels like a miracle. You help bury the dead, yours, theirs, civilians. No ceremony. Just names scrawled on tags, crosses made of whatever's nearby. You drive a stake into the ground and tie Donnelly's notebook to it with twine. No one says anything. Everyone understands. Before you leave Okinawa, you stand on a bluff overlooking the sea. The waves crash against the cliffs. Below, the remains of a torpedoed Japanese boat rock gently. You light a cigarette, stare at the horizon, and think of home. You wonder what's next. You hear whispers. Invasion of the mainland, a final push. You nod. Then you stamp out the cigarette and turn away. The island stays behind you, scarred but still standing. Like you ease your breath, knuckles white on your rifle, as the early morning fog clings low over the frosty fields of the Hurtgen forest. It's late 1944, and the air smells like pine, damp soil, and the kind of quiet that should comfort but doesn't. This isn't Normandy, where the hedgerows gave you cover. This is the Hurtgen, and it feels more like a haunted maze than a battlefield. You're part of an American infantry unit trudging through the most miserable corner of Western Germany. The forest stretches ahead in dark, vertical line of spruce and fir packed tightly together like nature's own prison bars. The branches above you form a canopy so dense it might as well be a roof. Sunlight. You forgot what that looks like. Hope? That too. You were told this forest is strategically necessary. Something about securing the flank, about preventing German counterattacks while the big push into the Ruhr begins. Historians still argue if it was worth it. Some say it was vital. Others call it a pointless meat grinder. You suspect the truth lies somewhere under all this mud, curled beside the shell fragments and broken helmets. The trees make everything worse. Artillery doesn't just explode, it bounces and bursts in the air, shredding branches and sending splinters flying like wooden daggers. Tree bursts, they call them, like it's a fun camp activity. You've seen what one does to a man's back. It's not tree sap that splashes the bark. Your boots are always wet. The ground never dries. And when it rains, which it does almost every day, the mud turns slick enough to swallow ankles. You fall twice before noon. The second time, you land hard on your pack and knock the wind out of yourself. You lie there, staring up through a break in the canopy, wondering if the sky forgot about this place. You move in squads, staying low, navigating by compass because the landmarks all look the same. Trees, rocks, more trees. You carve notches in trunks just to remember which way you came. One guy in your platoon jokes that you'll walk in circles until the war ends and then just retire here, like forest trolls. You laugh, but nervously. The Germans are dug in deep, using old Westwall bunkers reinforced with concrete and reinforced hatred. They know this terrain. It's their backyard, and they fight like it. Booby traps, landmines, snipers hiding in root systems. You start to suspect the squirrels are watching you with binoculars. You pass a half-frozen creek with a busted footbridge. A helmet floats by slowly. It's American. You don't recognize the number stenciled on the side. You keep moving. You take cover in a foxhole someone else dug too shallow, half-flooded, and full of cigarette butts. You wonder if the guy who dug it made it out. Probably not. You try to rest, but your toes have gone numb, and your gloves are soaked. You light a cigarette with shaking fingers. It helps for a minute. Then the wind shifts, and you lose the flame. Every hill here has a name: Hill 400, Hill 332, Call Trail, Vossenack Ridge. But these aren't hills you want to climb for the view. They're just targets, exposed, muddy slopes that the Germans shell the moment you so much as peek over the top. You climb one with your squad on a Monday. By Tuesday, half of them are gone. A medic wraps your leg after you trip a tripwire and catch shrapnel along your shin. It's not bad, just enough to make stairs your mortal enemy. He hums while he works. The tune's familiar, but you can't place it. Something from the radio, maybe, or a memory from before the forest. In the village of Schmidt, or what's left of it, you take cover in a stone basement with 4 other guys and a dog someone found wandering alone. The dog won't stop shaking. None of you will. You eat dry crackers and soup that tastes like hot paper. You play a game trying to remember the names of all the state capitals. No one remembers Vermont's. You make one up: Burlingtonstein. The next morning, you find that the basement's now part of a crater. You dig your way out with your entrenching tool and one desperate elbow. The dog's gone. You don't ask what happened. Shells fall at random. There's no rhythm, no pattern, just sudden booms that make your stomach jump. You begin to flinch at thunder, at dropped pans, at your own heartbeat when it pounds too loud. A chaplain visits once. He gives a small service by a broken jeep, reading from a Bible with pages so wrinkled it looks like it's been crying. You don't remember the sermon, just the way he looked when he offered each man a stick of gum afterward, like it was holy. You're told the enemy line is thinning, that the forest is nearly yours, that you've almost reached the end. But the Hurtgen doesn't end, it just tapers. You leave one part and enter another that looks the same, maybe worse. The final push comes with the first frost of December. You wake with ice crusting your blanket, and your fingers refuse to move properly. You stagger forward anyway, rifle slung, boots half frozen, wondering how much longer your legs will obey. At last, you reach a clearing, no shell holes, no mines, no bodies, just grass and silence. It feels wrong, too calm, too open. You crouch low and wait. Nothing happens. Eventually, command confirms it. Your sector of the forest is secured. What that means is unclear. You're still surrounded by trees, still coughing up dirt, still watching the tree line like it might lurch forward and swallow you whole. You leave the Hurtgen the same way you entered it, quietly, grimy, and 10 pounds lighter. Your boots leave faint tracks in the frost. Behind you, the forest begins to forget your name. They'll call this the longest battle on German soil. Nearly 30,000 American casualties, more than 100 days of slogging, freezing, and dying for ground that some maps don't even bother to label. But you were there, you remember. You don't remember why, just the cold, the trees, the way the wind sounded when it passed through the forest like it had somewhere else to be. You grip the icy barrel of your rifle with gloved hands that stopped feeling like hands 2 hours ago. Your breath fogs in front of you, curling up into the black morning air like smoke from a forgotten fire. Snow crunches beneath your boots, muffled by layers of powder that cling to every branch, every helmet, every silent foxhole. This is the Ardennes, December 1944. You're smack in the middle of what people will call the Battle of the Bulge, though there's nothing round or soft about it. It's jagged, sudden, and you're freezing. A week ago, you were just settling in for what you'd hoped would be a quiet Christmas near the Belgian-Luxembourg border. Maybe some coffee, maybe some chocolate from a care package. Instead, Hitler launched a massive surprise counteroffensive through the dense Ardennes forest, banking on fog, snow, and audacity to punch a hole in the Allied lines. And bad Nusets working, at least for now. You're part of a frontline unit near Bastogne. The roads are narrow, hemmed in by fir trees that lean heavy with snow, looking peaceful like a postcard. Except this postcard has tanks rumbling down it and mortars firing from somewhere unseen. The fog makes visibility almost useless. You hear gunfire before you see anything. Sometimes you fire at shapes that turn out to be trees. Sometimes they turn out to be Germans. The worst part? The surprise. Most of you weren't ready. Half your gear's still packed for autumn. You wrap rags around your boots, layer shirts under jackets, and keep moving. The supply lines are a mess. You stretch a single chocolate bar over 3 days, licking it like a secret. On day 2, a buddy from Arkansas strips the lining from his helmet to wrap his ears. You do the same. It doesn't help. Your ears still ache. Everything aches. You haven't seen a clean latrine or a warm meal since the attack began. You swap your last cigarette for a pair of wool socks, even though they don't match and one smells like foot soup. Worth it. The Germans push hard, especially around St. Vith, Elsenborn Ridge, and Bastogne. They use tanks and infantry, artillery, and fog. They've even got English-speaking soldiers in stolen U.S. uniforms sowing confusion behind the lines. You're told to quiz anyone suspicious with questions only Americans would know, like naming baseball teams, or the capital of Illinois. Spoiler, it's Springfield, not Chicago. You learn this the hard way. Historians still argue if the Allied command should have seen it coming. Some say intelligence failed. Others argue it was simply too bold, too insane to anticipate. What you know is this: surprise or not, you're here now, and the Germans aren't slowing down. One morning, you wake to find a line of frozen footprints leading away from your position. They just stop. No body, no gear, just gone. You don't ask questions. You pack up your things and follow orders. You're told to hold the line. No retreat, no surrender. Bastogne becomes the anchor. The 101st Airborne is surrounded there, cut off and holding out. You hear about General McAuliffe's famous reply when the Germans demand his surrender. Nuts. You wonder if it was really that clean. He probably said something more colorful, but the press needed something printable. The snow gets deeper, the wind sharper. You wrap a blanket under your jacket and march like a man who's forgotten what toes feel like. You stand watch behind a tree, listening for footsteps, straining to hear through the howl of wind. A deer crosses the road once. Everyone aims. No one fires. You meet a Belgian farmer who shares potatoes roasted over a tiny fire. They're undercooked, but they're warm. He doesn't speak English. You don't speak French. But you nod, and he nods, and that's enough. One night, a German artillery barrage hits just behind your line. The shockwave lifts you slightly. Dirt rains down. You check yourself, no blood, just mud. You crawl to your buddy and find him missing a boot. He swears for 5 minutes straight, then limps onward. As Christmas nears, things somehow get worse. Ammunition's low, food's low, morale's lower. Someone decorates a pine branch with chocolate wrappers. It's both sad and beautiful. You share a tin of canned peaches with 5 other guys. Best Christmas dinner of your life. Then, finally, air support. The weather clears. You hear the drone of planes and nearly cry. C-47S drop supplies. Food, ammo, winter gear. Some chutes snag in trees. You climb one, grab a box, and toss it down like it's treasure. It kind of is. Reinforcements arrive. Patton's Third Army punches through from the south in a maneuver that would have seemed impossible a week ago. You see the first tanks roll into Bastogne and feel something unrecognizable relief. Not safety, but something adjacent. You push back now. The Germans are retreating. Slowly, painfully. The tide turns, and so do your feet north again, into the snowy woods. The bodies along the road are mostly frozen. Some look like they're just sleeping. You don't stop to check. You pass a knocked-out Tiger tank, still smoldering. Nearby, a foxhole holds a small notebook. You flip through it. German. You can't read it, but the last page has a sketch of a bird. You tuck it into your jacket. By late January, the bulge is gone. Flattened. What remains are forests scorched, blackened towns reduced to bricks and bones. The Allies take back the ground. They lost slowly, one shell crater at a time. You limp out of the Ardennes thinner, paler, quieter. Nearly 90,000 American casualties, tens of thousands of German losses, civilians caught in between. You survived it, but it doesn't feel like a win. It feels like a draw against winter itself, and you barely broke even. A chaplain gives a short speech near a blown-out church. Something about resilience. You stop listening after a while and just stare at the snow falling through the rafters. It's almost gentle now. Soft. You pick up a handful of it. Let it melt through your glove. You swear it smells like cordite. You wake to the sound of boots crunching gravel and a voice whispering, "They're already moving." It's June 1942, and you're somewhere near Kharkov in eastern Ukraine, or at least what used to be Ukraine, before it became a constantly reshuffled battlefield between two of the most stubborn and vengeful armies on the planet. You're with the Red Army, part of an ambitious Soviet counteroffensive meant to smash the German front line wide open. Spoiler alert, it won't. You drag yourself from your shallow trench and look around. Everything is gray. The sky, the dust, even your reflection in the back of a dented helmet. The Germans are out there dug in, waiting. You're told they're stretched thin, overconfident, weakened by winter and supply issues. You're told the plan will work, that this is your moment to strike, to reclaim ground lost during last year's brutal retreat. You believe it until the first shells start falling. Operation Friederichswald, the Germans call it, isn't just a defensive maneuver. It's a trap, and you're walking straight into it. As the Soviet forces push forward from the Izium salient, German units swing around from the north and south in a massive pincer movement. It's chess played with bodies, and you're one of the pawns being casually sacrificed for position. At first, things seem to go well. You advance over open ground, through wheat fields and ruined villages, the kind with wells that creak when the wind hits just right. You trade fire with a few scattered German units, overrun a trench system, even capture an officer with a fancy silver whistle and 3 grenades sewn into his coat lining. You think, maybe, just maybe, this time will be different. But the next morning, you notice the tanks stop coming. Radio chatter turns garbled. The infantry beside units from the 6th and 57th armies begin to disappear. Not because they're retreating, because they're surrounded. Historians still debate how the Soviets didn't see it coming. Some blame overconfidence. Others point to Stalin's interference in military planning. He personally demanded aggressive action against better judgment. Whatever the cause, the Red Army is now trapped in a massive pocket outside Kharkov, and you're right in the middle of it. The temperature rises, and the air begins to stink not of rot, not yet but of sweat and metal and nervous breathing. You're ordered to hold a position near a farmhouse that's already been shelled to splinters. You dig a foxhole under a broken wagon wheel and pretend the wood overhead offers protection. A tank rumbles by, belching smoke. You see it vanish over the horizon and then hear the hiss of an incoming shell. The explosion flips the earth like a blanket. You land hard, tasting blood and mud. Someone screams. You can't see who. The smoke is thick. When it clears, your unit has lost half its men and gained a crater where your mortar team used to be. Your commander, a former railroad worker with one eye and no patience, tells you to keep moving. You do. Through ravines, over burnt-out trucks, past horses no longer tethered to anything. You crawl through tall grass and come upon a field hospital overrun by the wounded limbs in slings, faces bandaged, men whispering prayers in between sips of bitter water. A nurse offers you bread. You save half for later. You don't know why. A German plane strafes your column at noon. You dive into a ditch and stay there for 2 hours. The ditch is full of discarded ration tins and one empty wine bottle with a wax seal. Someone must have celebrated once. You wonder if it was a wedding or a funeral. You're cut off now. No clear command. No clean map. You follow smoke plumes and rifle fire, heading toward a railway line that's supposed to be safe. It's not. It's a graveyard of carriages and twisted track. A train engine lies on its side, still hissing steam like it's trying to breathe. You regroup with remnants from another division. Everyone looks lost, like actors who forgot the script. You're down to half a magazine and a bayonet chipped from scraping it on bricks during house-to-house fighting 2 days ago. You share a joke about sending it back to the factory with a review. No one laughs. On the 3rd day, you hear tanks again, German ones this time. You can tell by the engine whine, higher pitched and precise. They emerge from the tree line like beasts in a fairy tale, flanked by infantry in gray. You hold your position and open fire. A man next to you, barely more than a boy, shouts, "For the motherland," and then vanishes in a puff of dust. The encirclement tightens. Ammunition runs out. You scavenge from fallen comrades, from enemy bodies. You dig through satchels looking for dry socks or maybe a cigarette. Anything to feel human. You find a photograph of a woman holding a child in front of a stone house. You keep it. Later, you burn it for warmth. The retreat becomes a scramble. You flee across open fields under constant fire. At one point, you crawl into a drainage ditch and lie there for hours, unmoving, as trucks and tanks roll past overhead. You whisper a lullaby to yourself. Something your grandmother used to hum. The words are gone. The tune stays. Some soldiers surrender. Others don't get the chance. The Luftwaffe patrols the skies. And there is no rescue, No airdrop. No cavalry coming. Just kilometers of open land and a slowly closing fist. Eventually, you're ordered to break out. A desperate charge to escape the pocket. You fix bayonets, even though most of you barely have bullets. You charge anyway. Through smoke, through wire, through machine gun nests that chew through men like dry leaves. You don't know how you survive. You don't ask. You just run until your legs give out and you collapse in the arms of another unit, one that managed to hold the edge of the line. They stare at you like you're a ghost. The Battle of Kharkov ends in a crushing Soviet defeat. Over 200,000 Red Army troops are lost, killed, captured, or missing. German losses are far fewer. It will take many months and another 2 battles for the Soviets to reclaim this ground. You limp away from Kharkov with a stitched shoulder, a notebook full of mud, and a face that doesn't quite smile right anymore. You cross a small stream and see your reflection. You look like someone else, but you're alive. For now. And in a war like this, that's all you can ask for. You open your eyes to the sight of white cliffs looming like sentinels above a shoreline that barely counts as land. You're standing trying to tune a narrow strip of sand in Dunkirk, France, in the summer of 1940. Behind you, the ruins of a retreating army. In front of you, the sea. Somewhere between the two, salvation is rumored to be floating on the tide. But mostly, all you can hear is the distant, dreadful drone of dive bombers. You're one of nearly 400,000 Allied soldiers, British, French, Belgian, trapped in a shrinking pocket as the German blitzkrieg crushes France with terrifying speed. The plan was to push forward, fight in Belgium, stop Hitler's forces in their tracks. Instead, you're cornered like a rabbit with its back to the ocean, and you're waiting, always waiting. The sand here smells of oil and singed canvas. The beach is cluttered with men, gear, and the husks of abandoned vehicles. You sit in a shallow hole you've scratched with your helmet, surrounded by others doing the same. Some read dog-eared books, others stare into nothing. A few play cards using ration biscuits as betting chips. The winner hoards them like gold. Every now and then, a Stuka dive bomber tears across the sky. You know it's coming before you see it. The sirens scream like a rusty kettle from hell. You dive flat to the ground, face pressed into the sand, hands clamped over your helmet like that might save your skull. The explosions are sharp, wet cracks. After each one, you get up slowly, like a cautious jack-in-the-box. Sometimes, a man doesn't get up at all. Historians still debate whether Dunkirk was a miracle or a disaster barely avoided. The Germans had the Allies trapped, but chose not to push their tanks to the sea, instead relying on the Luftwaffe to finish the job. Some argue it was Hitler's hesitation that saved you. Others think the swampy terrain slowed the armor. Either way, you're not about to ask too many questions. You're just hoping to be on one of those boats. Operation Dynamo, they call it. The plan to evacuate as many soldiers as possible from the beaches using Royal Navy ships, fishing trawlers, pleasure yachts, anything that can float and be sailed across the English Channel. You watch the horizon, scanning for the flicker of movement. When a boat appears, men scramble like ants toward it, waving, shouting, some even swimming. Order is a polite suggestion at this point. You finally get your name called for boarding on day 3. You trudge down the makeshift pier wooden planks, sandbags, bits of metal all the while ducking and flinching. You see a small vessel ahead, barely more than a tugboat, painted white, with a Union Jack flapping at the stern. It's crewed by a man who looks like he just finished lunch, and a boy who probably lied about his age. You climb aboard with 20 others. It groans under the weight. The boat pulls away from shore, engine coughing like a smoker. The water is calm, but your hands shake. You stare back at the beach, shrinking behind you, still crowded, still smoking, still echoing with distant booms. Halfway across, you hear engines, planes. You look up and see a German fighter banking toward your convoy. The anti-air gun on the lead boat opens fire, tracing lines of white into the sky. The fighter dives. You duck instinctively, even though it's not aiming for you. A boat to your left is hit. Flames bloom like a flower from its stern. Men leap into the sea, splashing wildly. The cold water doesn't put out all the fire. You help pull one man aboard your own boat. He's coughing, shivering, covered in oil. He mutters something in French and passes out. You sit beside him for the rest of the trip, occasionally checking to make sure he's breathing. When you finally reach Dover, you expect a cheer, a trumpet, something dramatic. Instead, you're met by quiet order. Tea, biscuits, a nurse with a clipboard. Name, regiment, any injuries. She checks your eyes like they might betray something your mouth won't. You answer mechanically. She pats your shoulder and moves on. You're herded into a warehouse where a sergeant barks out bunks and rations. You find a cot. It's thin and smells like mothballs, but it holds you. You sit down, take off your boots, and stare at your feet for 10 solid minutes. You survived Dunkirk, but you left something behind. Part of you is still on that beach, dodging bombs, listening for engine whines, waiting for the tide to carry you away. You don't know when it'll catch up to you again. Maybe next week, maybe in your sleep. The newspapers call it a triumph. Heroes return. Dunkirk spirit. There's even talk of making a film. You glance at a copy left on a bench and wonder if the editor ever crawled through wet sand while artillery stitched holes into the shoreline like a tailor having a breakdown. They say 338,000 men made it out. They say you made history. You just feel tired. You reach into your pack and find a biscuit from the card game. Cracked, crumbly. You eat it anyway. Then you lie back and close your eyes. The room fades. But the beach stays. You stare down a stretch of road choked with smoke and the smell of burning rubber. It's July 1943, and you're on the island of Sicily, where the sun is blinding. The rocks are sharp enough to cut through your soles, and the flies are so persistent they might as well be Axis spies. Operation Husky is underway, and what was meant to be a swift, coordinated invasion has quickly turned into a sweltering uphill brawl through cactus-choked hills and sun-baked towns that seem allergic to surrender. You landed on the southeastern coast a few days ago, part of the American 7th Army. The British 8th landed nearby, and, theoretically, you're advancing together across the island. In practice, it feels more like an Olympic race in opposite directions. You keep getting turned around by last-minute orders in roads that twist like a drunk's handwriting. You pass olive groves riddled with shell holes and vineyards, scorched into blackened lattices. Every time you round a corner, there's a new ruined village with a name you can't pronounce, and a church with at least one fresco still stubbornly clinging to the wall. The people are mostly gone either hiding, fleeing, or pretending you're ghosts. The Germans are pulling back, but they don't make it easy. They fight a skilled, deliberate rearguard action minefields, booby traps, artillery hidden in hilltop farmhouses. You learn quickly that any stone wall might contain a machine gun. Any haystack could have a sniper in it. You begin to look at goats with suspicion. Historians still debate whether the Axis could have held Sicily longer or if retreating was the smartest option. Some say Kesselring executed a brilliant withdrawal. Others think he bailed too soon. You're not reading reports, though. You're ducking mortars while trying not to pass out from heat exhaustion and dehydration. Your canteen's been dry since midday, and your sergeant's trying to convince you the sweat dripping into your mouth counts as hydration. On day 5, your unit takes a town called Gela. You enter behind a Sherman tank that sounds like it's coughing its way to retirement. The streets are narrow, the buildings tall and close together, and the air smells of frying garlic, which would be charming if not for the machine gun nest 2 stories up. You and a buddy toss a grenade through a window and duck. The building groans, coughs, dust, and falls silent. In a courtyard, you find an old man with a white beard sweeping up rubble. He looks at you, shrugs, and keeps sweeping. You offer him a cigarette. He declines with a grunt and points you toward the next alley. The terrain becomes mountainous the farther north you go. Sicily wasn't built for tanks. Your boots slip on rocky trails, and every climb feels like a punishment for something you didn't do. You reach Troina, where the Germans have decided to make a stand. The town is perched on a hill, surrounded by jagged peaks and narrow ridges that force you into single-file movements under sniper fire. You feel like you're trying to retake a medieval fortress with 20th century weapons and 19th century luck. The Battle of Troina lasts a week. 7 days of grinding, back and forth chaos. You take the same hill 3 times. On the third, you stay but barely. The Germans throw everything at you. 88s, Nebelwerfers, booby, trapped wine bottles. You joke that you're fighting ghosts because they appear, hit you, and vanish again. One afternoon, you take shelter in a ruined monastery. There's a shattered piano inside. You tap a few keys and hear something that might have once been music. Then a shell hits the far wall, and the keyboard explodes into splinters. You crawl under a broken bench and promise to never touch another piano again. Supplies come in fits and starts. C rations, ammunition, bandages sometimes drop too far from the line to retrieve safely. One night, a squad volunteers to fetch a supply crate from a field. Only 2 return. One has a can of peaches he holds like a baby. You all get a spoonful. You cry a little. No one mentions it. After Troina, you continue pushing toward Messinith, the final Axis evacuation point. The Germans are retreating across the strait to mainland Italy, but they're blowing bridges and laying traps behind them like breadcrumbs made of TNT. You pass trucks burned to husks, roads cratered beyond recognition, and a cow standing in the middle of a minefield looking smug. The British are closing in from the east, and there's an unspoken race to reach Messina first. Your colonel starts giving pep talks about honor and showing up Monty. You don't care about who gets the credit. You care about not getting shot crossing the next ridgeline. You finally reach the outskirts of Messina just after dawn. The harbor is still smoldering from Luftwaffe raids, and the last German boats have vanished into the haze. The city feels weirdly quiet, like a party everyone left 10 minutes before you arrived. You expect resistance. Instead, you get chickens, dust, and a marching band of fleas. You sit on a stone wall overlooking the water and watch the sun rise over Calabria. Italy's boot heel is right there, close, but also full of mountains, more entrenched troops, and rumors of even nastier terrain. Operation Husky ends with Sicily in Allied hands. It's considered a success. 31 days, thousands of enemy casualties, and a stepping stone to the Italian mainland. But it didn't feel fast. It didn't feel smooth. It felt like dragging yourself across a chessboard of hills and landmines, while the rules kept changing. You carve your initials into the wall with a bayonet. JL. U.S. 7th Army. 1,943. Then you sling your rifle, crack your back, and start walking again. The next invasion's coming. And your boots aren't even dry yet. You wake before dawn, eyelids stuck together by the grit of a restless night, and the air already tastes like ash. You're in Hamburg, Germany. It's July 1943, and the city is about to burn in a way that will etch itself into your senses forever. You're not on the front line, not in the trenches. You're in the middle of a modern city port town with steeples and shipyards, and yet it might as well be a battlefield by nightfall. Operation Gomorrah, they call it. A biblical name for a biblical kind of punishment. The Allied command has decided to break the back of German morale with a series of coordinated bombing raids, British by night, American by day, focused not just on strategic targets like factories and U-boat pens, but on the heart of Hamburg itself. The first night was bad. The second was worse. And tonight, they say, will be something else entirely. You've been assigned to civil defense, a vague title that means you do whatever needs doing when the sirens start. Help people to shelters, put out fires if you can, clear rubble if you're lucky. But deep down, you know there's no stopping what's coming. The last raid collapsed an entire row of apartment buildings in Eimsbüttel, and all you had to dig with was a coal shovel and your own panic. As the sun rises, the streets are almost normal. Trams roll past. Children walk with tin pails. Housewives line up at bakeries. But there's a tension in the Ira breath being held across the entire city. You pass a public notice board warning about incendiary bombs and urging citizens to remain calm and alert. You want to laugh, or maybe scream. Historians still argue if Hamburg was truly a turning point in the strategic bombing campaign. Some believe it proved that mass aerial bombardment could cripple an urban center and shake an enemy's resolve. Others argue it only hardened German resistance. You don't think in strategic terms. You just think about whether the fire breaks will hold and if the shelters under the cathedral are deep enough. That night, the sirens begin before sunset, wailing, long and hollow. You feel it in your chest before you even hear it in your ears. You race toward the assigned shelter, a concrete bunker beneath a grammar school, and help usher in a dozen people. Old men, babies, a girl with a violin case she refuses to let go of. The walls are thick, but you still hear the first explosions. Thuds, then cracks, then a roar. British Lancasters fly overhead, almost invisible in the black sky. The bombs fall in clusters. First high explosives to shatter water mains and roofs. Then incendiaries to ignite everything flammable. The first flames appear like distant lanterns. Then they multiply. Whole blocks are outlined in orange like hell, tracing a map. You try to keep people calm, handing out damp rags for breathing, checking the air filters, making sure the hatch is sealed. But you can't focus. Your mind keeps drifting upward to the street, the fire. The possibility that the shelter itself could collapse like so many others. You finally emerge the next morning, and what you see doesn't feel real. Hamburg is gone. Not in the way cities disappear on maps, but in the way forests do after a volcanic eruption. The heat still radiates from the ground. Entire neighborhoods are ash. People wander barefoot, hair singed, wrapped in tablecloths or curtains, anything not scorched. You walk past what was once a cinema. The sign still says Abendvorstellung. There is no evening showing anymore. One woman pulls a charred photograph from the rubble. She doesn't cry, just stares at it, then slips it into her pocket, like it might still mean something. You reach the Außenalster, the lake now reflecting a sky smudged black. Boats are half sunk. Swans paddle through debris like royalty in mourning. The air is filled with the smell of wet soot and singed wood, and beneath that something metallic and wrong. You stop trying to name it. The worst night is yet to come. On the 27th of July, the temperature is higher than usual. The weather conditions align in a cruel harmony: low humidity, still air, a vulnerable population, and thousands of wooden rooftops already damaged from earlier raids. That night's bombing triggers what will become one of history's most terrifying phenomena. A firestorm. You're underground again, this time in a new shelter near the harbor. The sirens blare, and you watch families sprint across intersections lit by the first flares. Then the sky opens. The fire spreads so quickly it feels alive. Not flames dancing along walls, no. This is flame with a hunger. A wind picks up inside the shelter vents, not from outside, but drawn toward the inferno. It's pulling air in so fast, trees outside bend and snap. The flames aren't just burning, they're breathing. You've heard firestorms described, but living through one is different. The heat is suffocating, even underground. Above, glass melts, bricks crack, asphalt boils. People on the surface are sucked into alleyways where oxygen used to be, then incinerated in seconds. The fire creates its own weather system, a vortex of flame over 2 miles wide. You stay huddled in the shelter for hours. Prayers are whispered. Some scream, others go silent. You keep your eyes shut because the shadows dancing on the walls are too violent, too fast. When the shelter hatch is finally opened, no one rushes out. They creep. More than 40,000 people die that week in Hamburg. Most in the firestorm, some in collapsed shelters, others in the days afterward from injuries, dehydration, or shock. The city's infrastructure is shredded, trams stopped, water lines ruptured, hospitals buried. Bodies are stacked in courtyards. A priest reads scripture over a field of shoe spares laid out neatly, their owners unidentifiable. And yet, the city still functions. Somehow, people sweep rubble. A piano is pulled from a ruin and played. Children chase one another through the ash, their laughter oddly out of place. You help bury a family you never knew, then sit beneath a scorched tree with a can of black bread and a song stuck in your head you can't quite place. Later, when you hear that the Allies called the mission a success, you don't argue. You just stare at the empty skyline where the spire of St. Nikolai used to be. The memory of Hamburg stays with you, not because of its numbers, not even because of its ruin, but because fire, once loosed from human hands, doesn't care about flags or uniforms. It only knows how to consume. You squint into the wind as the deck beneath your feet rises and falls, slower than you'd like but with the determined weight of history shifting direction. It's June 1942, and you're aboard the USS Enterprisonat, the one with warp drives and teleporters. But the real one, all steel and rivets and nerves strung tighter than piano wire. The Pacific stretches around you in every direction, glittering blue and deceptive as a poker player with 4 aces behind his back. Midway is coming, and you have no idea how close you are to changing the war. The tension on board is thick enough to slice with a bayonet. Everyone's pretending to be casual, cracking jokes, playing cards, eating powdered eggs. But underneath that surface is the silent certainty that someone's not coming back. Maybe a few someones. Maybe you. Rumors fly across the deck faster than aircraft. Japanese carriers have been spotted near Midway Atoll. Admiral Nimitz has a secret plan. Scouts from Pearl picked up coded transmissions. Something about AF, needing water. Historians still argue if the Japanese truly fell for the bait, or if luck played a bigger role. But from where you're standing, it's all one big question mark. You spend most of the morning checking your gear for the 5th time. Life vest? Check. Parachute? Mostly intact. Lucky photo of your dog wearing sunglasses? Tucked safely in your breast pocket. You try to eat, but your stomach isn't having it. Everything smells like oil and salt and adrenaline. The deck is slick with humidity and the faint stink of sweat soaked into canvas. When the signal comes, it's almost anticlimactic. Just a shouted order, a flurry of motion, and then you're running. You strap into your dauntless dive bomber, the cockpit crammed, your pilot calm and chewing gum like it's no big deal. The launch is sudden catapulted into the sky, ocean falling away behind you like a memory you didn't ask for. You fly low at first, part of a squadron arcing out over the endless sea. The sun glints off wingtips, and the radio crackles, with a mix of static and clipped voices, trying very hard not to sound scared. You climb, and the sky becomes vast, almost empty. It lulls you into thinking you're alone until you spot the distant flecks on the horizon. Japanese carriers, 4 of them, steaming east toward Midway, unaware that you're above and angry, and aiming to make this a turning point. The air grows hotter inside the cockpit. You double-check your instruments, fingers shaking slightly. The pilot mutters something you don't catch, probably a prayer, or a curse, maybe both. Then, the dive begins. If you've never dive-bombed from 20,000 feet, here's a quick summary. It's terrifying. The plane tips forward like it's giving up, nose angled at the ocean, the target growing fast enough to feel like you're inside a telescope. The wind howls, the gauges spin. Gravity yanks your stomach into your boots. You grip the sides, counting down to the bomb release, hoping you're still aligned and that someone isn't doing the same thing to you from above. You drop the bomb. The Dauntless pulls up hard, and your body strains against the harness like it's trying to escape. You glance back just in time to see the deck of the carrier below erupt into fire and chaos. One bomb hits the hangar deck. Another punches through fuel lines. The chain reaction begins before the smoke even has time to settle. You cheer. Then you vomit into a paper bag. Nobody notices. Back in formation, you regroup, flying through patches of cloud and smoke. There's yelling on the Radion squadron lost, another circling the wrong grid. Somewhere out there, Japanese Zeros are clawing at American torpedo bombers who never had a chance. They're going in low and slow, and you know the statistics. Torpedo Squadron 8 lost all 15 of its planes. Only one pilot was recovered. His name was Ensign George Gay, and he watched the rest of the battle floating alone in the water, hidden beneath a seat cushion. You wonder what went through his mind floating, waiting. The ocean vast and silent all around. The fight doesn't stop after one bombing run. There's chaos in every direction, planes flaming out midair, carriers listing as their crews scramble to douse infernos, destroyers weaving through wreckage trying to rescue survivors. You spot parachutes opening, like desperate white petals, drifting toward the sea. Some land gently, others catch fire before they even deploy. You learn not to stare too long. The Japanese lose 4 carriers, Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, and later, Hiryu, the same 4 that attacked Pearl Harbor just 6 months ago. It's like history is folding itself in half, closing the first chapter and hinting at the next, but it doesn't feel like victory. Not yet. You return to the Enterprise, with your ears ringing and your face flushed from sun and adrenaline. The deck is busier now. Medics helping the wounded, mechanics dragging crippled planes out of the way, someone trying to patch a hole in the fuselage with duct tape and a prayer. You sit against a bulkhead, sipping tepid water, trying to make your hands stop shaking. Someone brings you a cup of coffee. It's awful. You drink it all. Later, a briefing confirms the rumors. The Japanese fleet is retreating. 4 carriers sunk. Hundreds of aircraft gone. Thousands of lives vanished into the sea. Midway is saved, for now. The Pacific War just tilted in your favor. It'll take time, but this is the beginning of the end. Historians call Midway the turning point of the Pacific War. They say the Japanese never recovered from the blow, that the tide of battle shifted in just a few short days. You remember it differently, as a week where time slowed down, where each hour felt like an eternity wrapped in steel and smoke. A week where the sky rained fire and the ocean swallowed secrets. As the sun dips low and the carrier deck settles into a dull, groaning hum, you pull the photo of your dog from your pocket and smile faintly. You survived. You flew into the fire and made it back. And tomorrow? You'll do it again. Because that's what turning points feel like, not epic music and applause. Just sweat, smoke, and sky. You press your back against a wall still warm from the midday sun, though it offers no comfort. Behind you, chaos. Ahead of you, surrender. It's February 1942, and you're in Singaporeans, called the Gibraltar of the East, watching it collapse like a card house in a monsoon. The Japanese have advanced faster than anyone thought possible. And you? You're stuck in the middle, clutching a rifle you barely fired, waiting for an order you never wanted to hear. The days leading up to this moment were a whirlwind of disbelief. The Japanese swept down through Malaya like an unstoppable tide, bypassing defenses, outflanking armored columns, and using bicycles of all things to blitz through the jungle. You laughed the first time you heard it. Then you saw how quickly they moved. You haven't laughed since. Singapore was supposed to be invincible. British propaganda said it had guns facing every direction except they mostly faced south, toward the sea. The Japanese, of course, came from the north, right through the jungles of Malaya. Turns out trees are not a good substitute for trenches. And the big guns? Beautiful, massive, expensive. They were designed to stop ships, not soldiers on bicycles with grenades. Historians still argue over whether Singapore could have been held. Some blame General Percival for indecisiveness. Others accuse Churchill of underestimating Japanese capabilities. There are debates about the role of air superiority, failed Australian coordination, and whether the city was abandoned too quickly. All you know is, by the time the bombs started falling, the only thing falling faster was morale. You spent your first night under fire curled in a narrow alley behind a noodle stall, counting seconds between explosions and trying not to breathe too loudly. The city seemed to scream all around, you sirens, artillery, dogs, shouting in Malay, English, Japanese, a mess of languages all saying the same thing: run. By day, you helped build roadblocks, using overturned trams and sandbags filled with rice. The civilians helped to women dragging burlap sacks, boys carrying timber, an old man reinforcing a checkpoint with furniture from his parlor. At one point, you posted up behind a wardrobe with a drawer full of silk scarves and a bayonet you didn't know how to use. The Japanese artillery started hitting the water supply, the power plants, the hospitals. Fires spread from Chinatown to the docks. Everything smelled like smoke, sewage, and the salt of sweat-soaked uniforms. You moved in a haze, ferrying wounded, dodging sniper fire, sleeping in hour-long fits beside piles of rubble. One morning you found a water pump still working behind a shuttered tea house. You waited 2 hours in line for a full canteen. When it was your turn, a shell landed nearby. The pump cracked. The line scattered. You caught a shard of metal in your boot heel. A warning more than a wound. You kept walking. The civilian shelters were overcrowded, dark, and sweltering. People pressed shoulder to shoulder in underground car parks and half-dug bunkers. Children cried. Babies didn't. That silence was worse. You helped a mother fan her son's face while the air grew thicker with smoke. Later, you passed a bakery still smoldering, the bread inside baked black and inedible. A dog sniffed the doorstep, then walked away. The rumors grew darker. The Japanese were close. The defenders were folding. That's when you heard it General Percival was considering surrender. You didn't believe it at first. You thought it was just more smoke-fueled nonsense. But the officers' faces changed. Jokes dried up. Someone burned papers in a steel trash bin behind HQ. You saw a captain toss in a diary, then light a cigarette from the flames. The formal surrender came on the 15th of February, Chinese New Year. It should have been a day of fireworks and family meals. Instead, you watched as a long line of British officers in khaki uniforms filed into the Ford Motor Factory under a white flag. General Yamashita sat coolly in a chair, reportedly saying, "I give you 1 hour to decide." Percival agreed. You watched from a rooftop nearby, binoculars shaking in your hands. That was it. Over. The Union Jack was lowered. No speeches, no glory. Just silence and heat. What followed was worse. Tens of thousands of Allied troops became prisoners of war. You were among them. Herded through the streets, stripped of gear, marched to the Selarang barracks with the others. You passed burned-out tanks, horses shot in place, entire blocks blackened and unrecognizable. The Japanese guards barely looked at you, just barked orders and gestured with the butts of rifles. You didn't understand the words, but the meaning was clear. Move, or be moved. The humidity pressed on you like a second skin. You sweated through your uniform in an hour. You were given rice, water sometimes, a sleeping mat if you were lucky. The latrines overflowed. The heat made the stench unbearable. You heard of men already dying from dysentery. One whispered that some would be sent to work on a railway in Burma. You didn't know it then, but they meant the death railway, the one that would stretch into legend. But even before that, there was a moment quiet, surreal, when you sat in a courtyard with a dozen others, trying to understand what had happened. A nurse passed around boiled water. A chaplain offered prayer. A Scottish corporal taught someone how to whistle a tune from back home. It didn't make sense. But it helped. Singapore fell in just over a week, the largest British surrender in history. Over 80,000 troops captured. A fortress built on myths and underprepared for the reality of a well-coordinated, fast-moving, and relentless enemy. It shocked the world, shattered illusions. And for those inside it, like you, it felt like being dropped from a great height, with no idea how far down the ground was. You scratched a date into your mess tin, 15 divided by 2, divided by 42, and tucked it beneath your shirt. You'd need to remember that date. Because everything that came after started there. You can feel the steel groan beneath your boots as you sprint across the Ludendorff Bridge at Remagen, not entirely convinced it's going to hold. It's the 7th of March, 1945, and you're crossing the Rhine, Germany's final natural defense in what's essentially a death trap of girders, rail ties, and dynamite that, by all logic, should have been rubble by now. The bridge was rigged to blow. Everyone knows it. Everyone expects it. And yet here, it still stands, like a trap that forgot to spring. You're with the U.S. 9th Armored Division, and you just pulled off something historians will call either miraculous or utterly impossible. You found the last intact bridge over the Rhine accident. No lessened. Instead of waiting for orders, you decided to take it. Because if there's one rule in war, it's this. When you see an open door, don't ask questions. Just run through it and hope it doesn't slam shut behind you. And so you run. Fast. The bridge is a nightmare of twisted steel and wires. Charges are still strapped to the beams, some disarmed, some maybe not. Every step sounds like a coin toss. The enemy's on the other side, firing from bunkers, aiming at the thing you're standing on. The bridge shakes. You shake. You just keep moving. The first wave across your wave catches the Germans completely off guard. They never expected Americans to storm the bridgehead, let alone make it across. You fire into pillboxes, duck behind railcars, and clear the far bank inch by inch. You barely notice when your sergeant yells that the bridge is still standing. You're too focused on not dying. Historians still argue about why the Germans failed to destroy the bridge. Was it a faulty detonator? A panicked engineer? Was the chain of command too slow to react? Some reports say the main charge was wired improperly. Others say it was sabotage. You don't care about the reasons. You care that the damn thing didn't explode while you were in the middle of it. Once the initial fight's over, engineers swarm the bridge. You watch as they frantically cut wires, check for traps, reinforce struts with whatever they can, find metal plates, sandbags, prayers. You're assigned to help secure the eastern bank, trading fire with German troops retreating into the hills beyond. There's no time to rest. The bridge has to be held at all costs. Back on the west side, trucks roll in. Artillery pieces, medical units, radio equipment, all of it rumbling over the same fragile bridge that everyone swears is going to collapse. A week ago, crossing the Rhine felt like a fantasy. Now, it's a traffic jam. And you? You sit in a shell crater, eating chocolate from a British ration tin and wondering when the sky's going to fall. Because if you've learned anything in this war, it's that when things seem too lucky, they usually are. Then it happens. On the 17th of March, 10 days after the first crossing, the Ludendorff Bridge finally gives up. It groans, twists, and crashes into the Rhine in a spray of water and iron. You're not on it. Thank every deity you don't normally pray to. But you hear the splash and feel the rumble in your chest like thunder. 18 engineers die in the collapse of American, some German prisoners helping to repair it. It's a cruel full stop to a miracle sentence. But by then, the damage is done damage to the German defense, that is. Thousands of troops have already crossed. Multiple bridgeheads are established. The Allies now have a foothold east of the Rhine, and the last true natural barrier between them and the heart of Germany has been breached. You walk across a pontoon bridge a few days later, makeshift, wobbly, held together by cables and optimism. The air is warmer now, spring creeping in. You pass German civilians staring blankly from shattered windows, unsure whether to hate you, thank you, or just pretend you're not there. Some kids wave. You wave back. One offers you a hard-boiled egg. You trade a stick of gum for it. You help capture small towns where resistance is light, just a few rifle shots, and then a white flag out the window. In one village, the mayor greets you with coffee brewed from roasted barley and a polite nod. You shake his hand, then collapse into a barn to sleep for 6 hours straight. The news spreads fast. Americans cross the Rhine. The papers call it the beginning of the end. You want to believe it. But you've also heard that before at Normandy, at the Bulge, at Aachen, every end seems to bleed into the next beginning. Still, this one feels different. This one feels final. You revisit the site of the bridge days later. Just jagged pylons now, poking from the river like broken teeth. But the memory remains the mad dash, the bullets, the breathless crossing. You realize it wasn't just a physical moment, it was psychological, symbolic. For years, the Rhine had been Germany's shield, its pride. You helped punch right through it. You scratch your initials into a stone near the shore. Beneath it, you write the date. 3 divided by 7 divided by 45. When people talk about the fall of Nazi Germany, they'll point to many moments. Normandy, Stalingrad, the Bulge. But you'll remember this bridge, this mad steel skeleton of a crossing. This moment when courage outpaced fear and the river, once untouchable, became just another stretch of water between you and home. You tread carefully up a marble staircase, smeared with soot, and coated in the fine gray dust of collapse. Around you, the Reichstag creaks like an old giant with bad knees. It's the 30th of April, 1945, and you're in Berlin. What's left of it, anyway. The walls are scorched, windows shattered, ceilings collapsed in places where artillery kissed the building too hard. You step over bricks and bent railings, past doorways warped by flame. The war is ending. And it's ending here. You're a Red Army soldier in the 150th Rifle Division, fighting for every floor, every stairwell, every hallway lined with portraits now blackened and curling from fire. Hitler is somewhere nearby, or was. The rumors say he's in a bunker under the garden. Some say he's already dead. Others say he fled. You don't care. You've made it this far, and there's one last job to do. You clutch a Flagge Soviet banner red as the sky at dusk, and it's not just fabric. It's the promise of revenge, of triumph, of a war that took everything and gave back nothing except this moment. You're here to plant it. Not for a photo op. Not for history books. Just because someone has to mark the end. But getting to the top isn't easy. Snipers still haunt the rafters. The building is booby-trapped, possibly mined. At one point, a comrade ahead of you steps on a floor tile and vanishes in a bloom of flame and sound. You pause. Breathe. Keep going. You're numb to explosions. Now each one just a louder punctuation mark on this terrible sentence. Outside, Berlin burns. The Soviets encircle the city, block by block. Tanks move like cautious predators, firing into doorways. Mortars fall like hail. The air is thick with dust, smoke, and the low moan of buildings giving up. Berliners cower in basements, praying or muttering, or simply staring at the walls. Historians still argue whether the Reichstag's capture was purely symbolic. Hitler's actual bunker was elsewhere, but it didn't matter. This building, battered and broken, had become the icon. Taking it meant the war in Europe was finally coughing out its last breath. You finally reach the rooftop. And it's surreal. The balustrades are crumbling. Statues stare out, blank-eyed and broken. One arm of an eagle lies at your feet. You step over it and move to the edge, flag in hand. There's already smoke curling into the sky. Artillery flashes in the distance. And below, the city that once ruled an empire now lies flattened and humbled. You climb up the statue of Germania, herself ironic, considering. The flag flutters behind you, heavy with ash and rain. And then, you do it. You plant it. Just jam it into the stone and hold on. No fanfare. No trumpet. Just you, breathing hard. Dirt under your nails. Blood crusted on your sleeve. And that red banner catching the wind. Someone snaps a photo. It will become one of the most iconic images of the Warth Soviet flag over the Reichstag. Triumph wrapped in smoke and ruin. But right now, you just feel tired. You sit down beside a chunk of fallen masonry and eat the last of your bread. Stale, damp. Still better than the stuff you had back in Stalingrad. You drink water from a canteen that tastes faintly of rust and victory. Below, the shooting is already fading. It's ending. Not everywhere. Not yet. But here, on this rooftop, it feels final. Berlin officially surrenders a week later. Hitler is gone. He takes himself out in that bunker you never saw. His lieutenants scatter or die. Germany falls to pieces, divided like a pie no one wants to eat. You're assigned to occupation duty. Guard posts, ration deliveries, checking documents at corners where buildings still smolder. But none of it feels as real as this rooftop. This stone, this red cloth fluttering above the city that tried to consume the world. You light a cigarette and stare at the horizon, thinking of all the people you've met and lost along the way. That medic from Kursk who sang opera. The boy with the limp who cracked jokes in Kharkov. The woman in Leningrad who gave you half her bread and a poem on torn paper. They're ghosts now, floating between craters, across rivers, beneath the stones of cities shattered by ambition. You press your palm to the rooftop. Warm from the sun, or maybe from something else. Either way, it's over, at last. And now, you can breathe. The fighting has stopped, the smoke has cleared. The world, after years of chaos, trembles toward peace like a limb waking from numbness. You step down from the rooftop, feeling each stair as if it's part of a ceremony. Each level you descend, the noise of war fades just a little more, replaced by quiet, by dust settling, by the soft whimper of a wind unsure whether to whisper or weep. You pass the empty halls of the Reichstag walls scorched, murals broken, echoes of bootsteps long gone. Outside, the air holds a new kind of silence. Not the hush of dread, but the stillness of something exhausted. A chapter closed, a storm passed. You walk along the ruined streets, where flowers already peek through the cracks. A boy chases a paper scrap like it's a toy. A woman washes a scarf in a chipped basin. Somewhere, someone's baking bread again. The world begins to stitch itself together with slow, trembling fingers. You find a quiet place beneath a bent lamppost, and you sit. You let the day go. Let the noise drain from your bones. Let the memories stretch and soften into dreams. You've seen the worst, and survived it. You've crossed rivers, scaled rubble, dodged fire, and carried names of the fallen like weightless stones. And now? Now, you get to rest. So let your breath slow. Let your shoulders ease. Let sleep pull you gently, like the tide, away from the wreckage and into something softer. The war is over. Close your eyes. The world will still be here in the morning. Sweet dreams.